Chapter 21:36. With a single thought, they were annihilated. The sinful, smelting disciples, along with their leader, a human emperor, had been vaporized without a sound. Was this a god? Eaglehead stopped in midair. He had forgotten to flap his wings as he stared at the ground with trembling eyes. Pools of black residue were burning with blood-red flames. If not for this, it would be as though the sinful, smelting disciples had never been here. Eaglehead had never seen for himself how strong Emperor Lu was in the holy city. But now that he thought about it, the silver-haired young man before him was probably not much weaker than Emperor Lu. After all, one of the pools of burning black residue contained a human emperor. Thank you. Thank you. After a short silence, Eaglehead landed and bowed to Qin Hao with the other pig demons. The pig demons had struggled out of the cracks between life and death. In an instant, their attitude toward Qin Hao changed drastically. They were so grateful that tears streamed down their faces. The fox demons were terrified as they recalled the first time they saw Qin Hao. Fortunately, they had listened to Eaglehead and did not attack him. If not, the burning black residue on the ground would probably be their fate. Everyone, there's no need for this. Qin Hao looked at the pig demon who had been the first to be pierced by the bloody blade and sighed softly. Because he had sealed his godly power and hidden Tianlin, his senses were not as sharp as before. In addition, he had not fully adapted to the environment of the heavenly Tao, and the aura of the sinful smelting disciples had merged with the heavenly Tao. The pure killing intent mixed with the heavenly Tao was hard to detect if one did not pay attention. Therefore, a demon had died. Big Head, this is your fate. Death might be a form of release. Eaglehead gestured to the pig demons to bury the dead demon. Qin Hao is not responsible for this. Uncle Ing, you know spiritual arts, you know how to fly. Uncle Zhu's body became so big just now. Second Uncle Zhu's roar was so scary. Boo-hoo. Third uncle was killed by bad people. 8 or 9-year-old children had simple minds. After the initial shock, other than feeling sad, the behavior of Old Eagle and the other elders had also attracted their attention. Uncle Ying's life soul is a goshawk, so he can fly. Your Uncle Zhu, second uncle, and fourth uncle's life soul are hard-working and capable pig immortals who aren't afraid of hardships. Qin Hao squatted down and gently wiped away the tears on Hua Er's face as he kindly explained to the children. Old Eagle and the other demons couldn't help but feel a warm feeling in their hearts. There weren't many people in the world of slaughter who were as strong and kind as Qin Hao. Not good, this fire. Old Eagle seemed to think of something, and as he pointed at the undying flames, his face paled. Qin Hao also thought of something. With a thought, the red lotus divine fire on the ground was extinguished. However, at that moment, a large number of auras were rushing over from the distant sky. Obviously, they were attracted by the Tao insight of the red lotus flame. Old Eagle, no matter what happens later, just take everyone and leave. Don't look back. Qin Hao instructed and stepped forward with his hands behind his back. His proud figure faced the murderous aura in the air as he stood in front of the group of demons. It's not a sin refinement disciple. Old Eagle was still worried at first, but after seeing the figure clearly, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. They were from a sacred city. Swoosh, swoosh. Figures filled with killing intent landed one after another. Every one of them had an extremely cold aura, just like the aura Mu Zhan gave off. The person in the lead was a woman. Her face was as white as snow, and her facial features were exquisite. She had a cold temperament and a murderous aura. She had a unique beauty. 2 middle-aged men stood on either side of the woman. Their cultivation levels were not low. Together with the woman, they had stepped into the Emperor's path. Behind the 3 of them were more than a dozen cultivators. There were both Renhuangs and venerables of varying levels. Sin refinement cult. The woman's eyes swept around. She looked at the few blood blades on the ground and sensed the stench of blood in the air. As the sworn enemy of Sin refinement cult, she made a clear judgment. You killed them. A middle-aged man in a lofty posture looked down at the group of demons. His face was dignified, and his tone was like an order. "Your Majesty, we killed them." Old Eagle bowed and trembled. He felt a great pressure from the middle-aged man. "I killed them," Qin Hao said frankly. The woman glanced at Qin Hao. "Haha, I really didn't expect that there would be a few demons alive in this wild mountain forest. What's more interesting is that they even brought a group of children with them." Behind the middle-aged man, a young man with an arrogant face said in an extremely rude tone. He didn't hide his sarcasm. "Demons?" The orphans were stunned. "Uncle, they're under a demonic spell," the young man said to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's eyes were cold. With a casual flick of his sleeve, a strong gust of wind mixed with the majestic will of the emperor swept forward. The will of the great emperor swept over. Sand and stones flew in front of their eyes. The orphans subconsciously covered their eyes with their hands. When the gust passed and they opened their eyes again, they found that everything had changed. No one knew who shouted first. The orphans' faces were filled with horror. They shook off the hands that were holding them and ran toward the cultivators of the holy city almost instinctively. They hid behind the crowd that the woman had brought. Then little heads poked out one after another. They stared at Old Eagle and the group of demons with frightened faces. The horror in their eyes intensified. It turned out that the Uncle Ing, Uncle Zhu, and Aunt Hu had taught them were actually a group of ugly demons. They lived with a group of demons. "Sir, why do you have to do this?" Qin Hao said coldly to the middle-aged man. At this moment, Old Eagle, Pig Demon, and the others' expressions were extremely complicated. They were completely at a loss. The fear in the eyes of the orphans made them feel sorry and ashamed. I knew that this day would eventually come. Eagle Head felt extremely stifled as he struggled to let out a heavy sigh. He looked at Hua, who was hiding in the crowd of cultivators of the holy city. He knew that he could no longer teach her to read. He patted her head and told her bedtime stories, because from this moment on, demons and orphans would become people of two different worlds. And Old Eagle was the man-eating eagle demon that Hua feared in the stories. Demons are demons. Why do they have to learn from humans? However, there is no difference between demons and humans in today's world. The young man behind the middle-aged man seemed to be very satisfied with the scenery before him. Ever since the fire beacon opened, he had not encountered such a happy and fun thing in a long time. No, the difference is still very big. Some people are even worse than demons, just like you. Qin Hao stared at the young man. "What nonsense are you talking about?" The young man's eyes flashed with killing intent. The smile on his face instantly froze. Something's not right. A figure crouched on the ground and was carefully examining the black residue left behind by the extinguished red lotus divine fire. He raised his head and looked at the woman. "Princess, this should be the power of fire." The power of fire? The woman who led the group frowned slightly. When they were patrolling, they had indeed sensed a special power of the will of Wei here. So they came to investigate. Was it the power of fire that was almost extinct? "Is there a problem?" Qin Hao asked coldly. "I cultivate the way of fire and slaughter." As he spoke, Qin Hao stretched out his palm. A cluster of blood-red flames rose from his palm. He deliberately suppressed the intensity of the way of fire. Therefore, in the senses of the princess and the cultivators, it was not too powerful. Even so, the flames in Qin Hao's palm still made the princess of the holy city happy. It really is the power of fire. I haven't seen a fire cultivator in a long time. What is your name? Why are you with a group of demons? Perhaps the princess was too excited. She took the initiative to move closer to Qin Hao. She stretched out a jade-like finger as if she wanted to touch the flame in Qin Hao's palm. "Princess, be careful." A middle-aged man stepped forward to stop her. The princess was the apple of Emperor Li's eye. She was of noble status. "You're just a Renalong. You can't hurt me. What are you afraid of?" The princess turned around and scolded him. Perhaps she noticed that she had lost her composure. The excitement and joy on her face faded a little. She returned to her cold attitude. "I have been living in seclusion with my master for a long time. I wanted to hide from the catastrophe of fire and war. I didn't expect that I would still be discovered by the sinful refinement sect. In order to let me leave, my master. Qin Hao looked conflicted. Grief flashed in his eyes. He put out the fire in his palm with force. His clenched fists trembled with anger. Although he tried to hide it, the princess of the holy city still sensed his pain. Her tone softened. Who can be at peace under the flames of war? My condolences. Although she didn't know which sect Qin Hao and his master were from, since they had unfortunately been killed by the sinful refinement sect, and Qin Hao hadn't become a member of the sinful refinement sect, he was a friend of the holy city. Perhaps she could even get Qin Hao to join the holy city. The holy city's military is tight and has given up on many territories. This forest is actually not safe. It's not easy for you to hide until now. Now that the members of the sinful refinement sect have died here, they may soon send experts here. Why don't you follow me back to the holy city? The princess said. This. Qin Hao hesitated and turned his head to look at Eaglehead. This action warmed Eaglehead's heart. Clearly, he knew that Qin Hao was asking for his opinion. Such a powerful cultivator was willing to ally with demons without any reservations. It seemed that Qin Hao was more like a family to them, not a group of orphans. Oh, by the way, the holy city doesn't reject the demon clan. In fact, many demon emperors have brought their children to join us. At present, they have also carved out a large territory for the demon clan to resist the sinful refinement sect together, the princess said. What she meant was that Qin Hao could bring the eagle demon, the pig demon, and the fox demon back to the holy city. Many thanks, princess, but I still have to ask Uncle Eagle for his opinion. Qin Hao felt that the princess was a good person. His eyes met Eaglehead's, and Eaglehead replied, Now that things have come to this, we can't hide anymore. Rather than dying in the flames of war, why not follow Emperor Lu and fight? This old man is willing to bring them to the holy city. It's fine if they don't go. We won't force them, the young man behind the middle-aged man said. Shut up. No one will take you for a mute. The princess turned back and scolded him. Take care of your disciple. The middle-aged man was terrified. He glared at the young man, who hurriedly lowered his head. All right, then we will follow the princess back to the holy city. Qin Hao heaved a long sigh. He seemed to have struggled for a long time before finally coming to a decision. Haha, if father knew that there were still fire cultivators in this world, he would definitely be surprised. Come, follow me back. The princess' attitude toward Qin Hao was clearly much more superior than the others. As the daughter of Emperor Lu, she could do whatever she wanted. She could even capture him by force. But she didn't. Of course, the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. Now that almost all the sect and family on the continent were extinct, only the sinful refinement sect and the holy city were left, she naturally found it refreshing to meet Qin Hao, someone who cultivated the Tao of slaughter. It was reasonable that she treated him differently. Immediately, the group rose into the air. The demons who had hidden themselves from the world couldn't escape their fate of being baptized by the flames of war. They followed the princess of the holy city with Qin Hao. Chapter 21:37. High up in the sky, a group of people walked slowly. All right, you haven't told me your name yet. Ruo Ling looked at Qin Hao with an interesting gaze. My surname is Qin, and my name is Hao. Qin Hao reverted to his original name and looked forward. A broad black line appeared on the horizon. As he got closer, the black line grew larger, like a giant beast hibernating. That was the holy city. Qin Hao, Qin Hao. Princess Ruo Ling repeated his name a few times, finding it a little strange. Brother, your killing flames are very special. It seems very domineering, but the killing intent is not pure enough. I can see that your master must have protected you very well, Salo said. Based on the remnant aura of the Tao fire, he could feel a very domineering power from it. It seemed to have similar characteristics to the flames of the divine races recorded in the ancient books. The flaw was that the killing intent in the flames was not enough. Qin Hao looked at the youth who spoke. He remembered this person. Salo was the cultivator who squatted on the ground to check the remnant of the red lotus fire. His eyes shone with wisdom. Salo's words caused Qin Hao to be taken aback. To think that he could even sense that. Incredible. Qin Hao's killing intent was indeed not strong enough because he was not from the world of killing. So what? There are thousands of killing techniques in the imperial palace. If he stays by my father's side and learns from him, he will improve quickly. Princess Ruoling was very confident. It came from her confidence in Emperor Lo. Princess, this isn't very appropriate, right? A young man with short yellow hair was surprised. The princess had only interacted with Qin Hao for a few hours, and she had already taken him under her command. Moreover, she was prepared to keep him by the side of the Holy City Lord. You have a problem with that? Princess Ruoling asked. Who are you to tell the princess what to do? Mind your own business. Of the two middle-aged immortal emperors protecting the princess, Emperor Yuan, who had broken through the eagle head concealment spell, reprimanded the yellow-haired junior beside him. The rarer something was, the more precious it was. Since the fire beacon had been burning for more than 300 years, there were very few flame cultivators in the world today. Perhaps the Qin Hao they met today might be the only one in the world. Rare things would always attract attention. Even if the original value was not high, in a special environment, the value would be increased. Qin Hao was one of those rare people. The yellow-haired youth naturally understood this logic, but he still felt uncomfortable. He and his uncle had followed Emperor Lu for many years. They had worked hard in exchange for a chance to get close to Emperor Lu. What a joke. An unknown person in the wild mountains and forest who was in cahoots with demons actually soared to the heavens in a single bound, achieving the results that it took the uncle and nephew several hundred years to achieve. No matter who it was, they would feel that it was unfair. It couldn't be helped. After 300 years of slaughter under the flames of war, fire-type cultivators had withered away. Now that they had unexpectedly encountered one, the princess would definitely treat it as a treasure. The group continued to move forward slowly. The black shadow that emerged from the horizon grew taller and taller. It stretched for tens of thousands of li and was boundless. It was like a wall that separated the entire continent into two. Qin Hao realized that the further they went, the clearer the sky and cleaner the air. It was completely different from when they had fallen into the massacre world. There was no longer a drizzle, darkness, and dampness. There was also no smell of blood. This was probably a convenience. Different Daos led to different living environments. And Qin Hao approved of the world ruled by Emperor Lu. However, regardless of whether it was inside or outside the high wall, there was not much difference in the nature of the massacre that permeated the space. They were all equally cold. The Tao of benevolent slaughter and the Tao of sanguinity were only different in their methods. Qin Hao flew all the way through the air. When he was really close to the holy city, Qin Hao realized that he had still underestimated the wall in front of him. Because he was too far away, he had only seen a black line rising from the ground. But when he got closer, the line had turned into a pitch-black dome that seemed to connect with the sky, completely separating the world into two worlds. This was no longer a city wall. It was a veritable moat. What a spectacular sight! Old Eaglehead exclaimed. Emperor Lu was indeed the leader of the holy city. His ability to create was unparalleled. With such a heavenly wall erected, it was hard to imagine how the sinful refinement cult would be able to break in. How many lives would they have to sacrifice? This was a cold wall, but it was also a wall that brought safety. Only by hiding behind this wall could the people of the holy city see a sliver of hope for survival. Whoosh! Whoosh! The advancing troops drew a beautiful arc as they soared into the sky along the city wall that connected to the sky. Because it was simply too high, even Old Eagle and the other exalted realm Yao bees found it difficult to fly over the height of the city wall. The thick, pitch-black surface of the wall was covered with sparkling liquid. It flowed quietly like water, but did not slide down the wall. Qin Hao's red lotus-fiery eyes flashed as he looked at the crystals. He realized that these things were extremely sticky. Once something was stuck to the city wall, it would stick to it. This should be a defensive measure of the holy city. Qin Hao thought to himself, if one's cultivation level was low, it would be almost impossible to fly over the wall. A group of demons like Old Eaglehead would definitely die under the wall. Of course, this was only relative. It could not stop a human emperor. The group flew over the heavenly wall calmly. There was a large army stationed on top of the wall. It was also filled with large-scale battle equipment. From the army to the equipment, they were all meticulous and excellent. Overall, the defensive formation even surpassed that of the divine wilderness continent. When the guards saw Ruo Ling leading the group forward, they were extremely respectful. The moment they flew over the city wall, Qin Hao could see the reverence in the eyes of the soldiers below. Everyone's body was emitting the power of faith. Behind the heavenly wall, there were huge hanging towers. There was one every 100 zhang, extending parallel to the city wall. As far as the eye could see, it was also a pitch-black line. Every hanging tower was filled with soldiers. There were humans and demons. Moreover, a human emperor was assigned to guard it. It was connected to the heavenly wall not far ahead. Even if the sinful refinement sect members broke through the heavenly wall, they would definitely be bombarded by countless hanging towers. What was even more shocking was that behind the hanging towers, there were many fortresses. They were like small square cities, densely arranged. There were no less than 100 of them, and a large number of troops were hoarded in them. When Qin Hao saw this, he could not help but feel a chill. Although he had stepped into the divine path, within the imperial path, even if he crossed the heavenly wall and killed his way through the hanging towers, he would still have to face the counterattack of countless fortresses. It was hard to imagine the price he would have to pay to destroy Emperor Lu of the Holy City. If Xianyuan Wuying had used this method to arrange the battle in the southern region, Qin Hao would never have led more than 300 disciples of the Divine Palace to attack. They would definitely not have returned. Impressive, right? Ruo Ling saw the slight expression on Qin Hao's face and could not help but feel proud. She also thought that her father was very impressive. Otherwise, how could he have stopped the fire beacon and occupied a separate sky from the sinful refinement sex master? Impressive indeed, Qin Hao said sincerely. The heavenly wall was the first line of defense. The hanging towers were the second. And these fortresses, arranged in a square formation, should be a buffer zone. Looking at it this way, they had not actually reached the true holy city. Just as expected, flying past the numerous strongholds, a resplendent beam of light shone over. Qin Hao glanced over and saw a majestic golden city standing tall in the midst of the light, resembling a majestic palace. Above the imperial court, there were also many armored figures with powerful auras walking back and forth. The atmosphere was unusually solemn. Holy City. Qin Hao knew that this was Yinji City, the holy land of the Orthodoxy where Emperor Lu presided. At present, almost half of the living beings of the continent lived in Yinji City. The city defenses, hanging towers, and fortresses he had seen before were all self-organized armies of cultivators. And the soldiers on the walls of the imperial court ahead were the true descendants of Emperor Lu. We are almost at the holy city. There are some things I need to explain to you. The demon territory is separated from the human territory. To avoid unnecessary trouble, after you enter, it is best that you do not move too frequently between the two territories to avoid conflict, Princess Ruo Ling said. The way the demons acted was very different from the humans. Their living habits were also different, and the separation was easier to manage. We will strictly abide by the rules of the holy city. Old Eaglehead obeyed. After speaking, he looked at the group of orphans, his eyes filled with reluctance. You have to understand that they are descendants of a human race, and you are demons. These orphans cannot follow you to the demon territory. Besides, even if I agreed, they might not be willing now. Ruo Ling knew what old Eaglehead was thinking. Yes, princess. In the future, we will not have anything to do with these children. We are demons. Old Eaglehead saw Hua hiding tightly in the arms of a holy city cultivator among the children, and immediately lowered his head in shame. In the eyes of the humans, demons were lowly. They were not fit to take care of these orphans. And just as Princess Ruo Ling had said, even if Water were to follow old Eaglehead, that child would not be willing. Once she saw an eagle head on a human body, Huatra's eyes would only be filled with fear. Not to mention those green-faced, fanged pig demons. Sigh. Qin Hao sighed softly. If not for old Eagle Head, the orphans would have died long ago. His meticulous care and tireless education had been exchanged for active alienation and indifference. Especially in the eyes of the orphans, there was more or less disdain. No matter who it was, they would feel terrible. After greeting the city guard general, Princess Ruoling led the group into the holy city. As they landed, Qin Hao took note of the defenses in the city. The terrain of Yinzhua's city was very complicated. It was almost a miniature version of the sky walls, hanging towers and fortresses. Every step was filled with danger. There were many strange defensive systems that even Qin Hao could not understand. But Ruoling's description of the demon district and human territory was very clear. With the imperial palace as the boundary, the left side was the human territory, while the right side was where the demons gathered. The environment of the human territory was very good. It was prosperous and orderly, not much different from the life in a normal plane. On the other hand, the demon race was much more chaotic. Even though they were placed in the sacred city and were under the supervision of the imperial palace's guards, the sounds of fighting still shook the sky. From time to time, a tall building would be destroyed by a tyrannical external force. There were also huge figures being blasted into the sky. Seeing the situation in the demon district, old Eagle Head was probably unwilling to follow Huater, even if she was willing to. All right, you can go directly to the demon district. Once there, my father's men will make arrangements for you. I will have people take good care of these orphans, Ruoling said to old Eagle Head. Then, she glanced at Qin Hao. Let's go. She was about to head for the imperial palace, but Qin Hao did not move. Ruoling paused and couldn't help but frown. Thank you for your kindness, princess, but I will go with old Eagle Head for now. They just arrived, and I am not at ease, Qin Hao said. Chapter 2138. As a human, he did not go to human territory. The princess had wanted to bring Qin Hao into the palace, but Qin Hao had chosen to be with a demon. To put it nicely, he valued friendship. To put it bluntly, he did not know how to appreciate favors. The blonde, short-haired youth laughed coldly. Seeing this, Ruoling led Salo and the other guards back to Imperial Palace Lo. She was indeed a little interested in Qin Hao, but it was just pure interest. She would not drag him along. The flames of war had descended, and the slaughter was endless. What was a little interest? Even Ruoling, the daughter of Emperor Lu, could not guarantee that she would survive to the end. In the face of the big picture, interest was insignificant. The two tribes separated immediately. Qin Hao followed old Eagle Head to the demon district, while Princess Ruoling left behind a cultivator from the holy city to lead the orphans to human territory to settle them down. When they parted, the orphans had no attachment to old Eagle Head, who had taken them in. They even fled, afraid that old Eagle Head would leave them behind. They did not want to live with demons in the demon district. The prosperity of human territory was what they yearned for. Old Eagle Head looked at Hua's tiny back and sighed silently. He hoped that the people of the holy city would treat the orphans well. Although he was reluctant, old Eagle Head left decisively. Many things in this world could not be fulfilled just because one side was willing. That was just wishful thinking. They arrived at the demon district. There was a residence here, guarded by a martial emperor. The person who received Qin Hao and old Eagle Head was just a subordinate of the martial emperor. After hearing the princess's instructions, he led them into the demon district. After a few rounds, he finally arranged for them to stay in a dirty, open space. You can do it yourselves. In the future, stay obediently and do not cause trouble. If the holy city needs you, be prepared to contribute everything. After saying this, the guard left. Old Eagle Head looked at the trash on the ground and felt helpless. The other party had asked them to build their own houses. The holy city's military was tight, and everything was focused on guarding the defensive line. They could not do everything for the refugees. This was understandable. However, leading them to a piece of trash in the demon district, was clearly looking down on them. It was a clear message to Eagle Head that they were trash. Qin Hao stood amidst the rubbish and looked up to survey the area. The ground beneath his feet was very low, and the demons living nearby were of very low races. Looking at the vast demon district, there were actually many places with much better environments. The higher the ground, the better the environment. However, the demons living there were also very strong. The highest point was a resplendent area filled with majestic palaces where demon emperors lived. Clearly, the demon territory was divided into nobility and lowliness. As for the eagle head and the pig spirit, they were undoubtedly inferior demons. "I'll have to trouble you pig brothers to bring some wood over," Qin Hao said to the pig demons. It didn't matter where he lived. Right now, other than his life, he didn't care about anything else. The pig demons looked at each other and nodded. They trotted towards a small mountain not far away. There were many trees growing there. They used to live in caves and weren't very good at building houses. However, when it came to physical labor, these pig demons didn't lack strength. "Guest, since the princess appreciates you, why don't you go to the luxurious palace? Why do you have to suffer with us?" Sigh. Old Eagle Head felt pity for Qin Hao. "The Emperor Palace is luxurious, but I might not be able to live comfortably here. Although this place is a little dirty, it's still carefree and casual. Not only that, with all of you here, I wouldn't necessarily have to suffer." Qin Hao smiled. The holy city cultivators brought by Ruo Ling didn't know Qin Hao's background. Old Eagle Head had already guessed that Qin Hao wasn't from the world of massacres, but he didn't expose him. This gratitude was only natural. It was also why Qin Hao was so determined to accompany Old Eagle Head. In this entire plain, Old Eagle Head was the one who treated Qin Hao the best. He had always treated him with respect. Old Eagle Head was slightly taken aback by this gratitude, but he soon revealed a calm smile. Although he didn't know which plane Qin Hao was from, he was already unlucky enough to fall into the world of massacres. How could he betray him and cause trouble for him? Now that the flames of war had descended, only by supporting each other could they live longer. Qin Hao was very strong, so it was impossible for Old Eagle Head to say that he didn't have any selfish motives. However, he had only wanted Qin Hao to help take care of the orphans. He hadn't expected that after entering the holy city, Qin Hao would abandon human territory and the imperial palace to accompany them. "Little brother, we've brought them. See if there's enough. If there's not enough, we'll pull them out again." Boom! A few loud sounds were heard. Thick and round trees were thrown to the ground by the pig demons. They pulled them out and carried back. Qin Hao roughly estimated and smiled. "I'll have to trouble you pig brothers to make 3 more trips. I think it should be enough." Okay. The pig demons didn't ask any questions. They listened to whatever Qin Hao said and ran back up the mountain. "Handsome brother, are you preparing to build a big house?" The brown-furred fox called Tanuki asked happily. Because Qin Hao was handsome and they didn't know his name back then, they all called Qin Hao handsome brother, which meant handsome little brother. It's bigger than your old thatched hut," Qin Hao replied with a smile. Then he stamped his foot on the ground. With a bang, the ground shook. This dirty and messy garbage area was actually transformed by the force of Qin Hao's foot. Buzz! A mound of earth rose from the center of the ground, getting higher and higher. The nearby soil flowed up along the mound of earth and gradually gathered into a sizable mountain. The garbage and waste thrown by the demon clan were all pressed into a solid foundation. Then, Qin Hao's sword fingers moved in front of him. Strands of red light intertwined, and the big trees cut by the pig demons floated up. Suddenly, wood shavings flew and were cut into pieces by the sword chi. Soon, a wooden frame of an attic was built. The shape was beautiful and very pleasing to the eye. Even if it wasn't completed, it already gave people a sense of refined elegance. What a clever method! Old Eagle Head praised. A pair of sharp eagle eyes flashed with a strange luster. Just by looking at the huge outline of the wooden frame, it was definitely not worse than the palaces at the top of the demon area. Big trees were constantly carried by the pig demons. Every time they made a trip back, They could clearly see that the outline of the wooden frame standing on the small mountain was more exquisite, so they were full of energy. Soon, in the sword light, pieces of wood were born and went to fill in the gaps of the attic, turning into walls. Not long after, the roof of the attic was covered. Under the carving of Qin Hao's extraordinary sword skills, a fresh 3-story wooden building came into being. There were a few rooms beside the wooden building. As the earthen walls surrounded the entire mountain, a large palace-like courtyard was born. Good swordsmanship. You can use it so cleverly and control everything. Guest, you are really a god. Old Eagle Head was full of praise. He had cultivated to the demon lord level in his life and had actually seen many humans, but none of them could compare with Qin Hao's swordsmanship. Come, let's go home. Qin Hao said to the foxes and the sweaty pig demons. Yes. The demons responded in unison and ran excitedly toward the courtyard on the mountain. Home. What a warm word. Hearing it in their hearts, they inexplicably felt like crying. It's so beautiful. I didn't expect to live in such a good place in my life. Little Tanuki stood in the courtyard, not daring to step into the building for fear that the dust on her shoes would sully this sacred place. The pig demons and the other foxes were the same. Their faces were intoxicated, as if they were in a dream. This was 10 times, 100 times better than the caves and huts they used to live in. No, there was no comparison at all. This was an immortal building, a building that only immortals could live in. Were these demons really worthy of it? If Horror and Hoozy were still here, I don't know how happy they would be. Old Eaglehead sighed. Even now, he was still thinking about those children. He didn't know which family the princess's subordinates had arranged for them to live in. What if those families treated the children well? What kind of small demons are you? How dare you steal the divine tree that I live in to build a house? You're simply courting death. Just as Qin Hao and the others were about to check in, a great rock shot out from within the dense forest. It had a wingspan of 15 meters and emanated a ferocious, demonic aura. It circled in the air, causing the wind to howl. What a small building. Who came to my territory and built a house without saying a word? They simply don't take me, the Golden Apex King, seriously. There was a thud. The sound of heavy footsteps stomping on the ground shook the pavilion and courtyard that Qin Hao had just constructed to the point of trembling repeatedly. After that, a 6-armed guardian king led a group of ferocious mountain apes over while clamoring outside the courtyard, and it was called the Golden Summit King. With a thought, Qin Hao released a strand of Tao wolf from his body and stabilized the foundation. He turned around and swept his gaze over. He saw that the 6-armed King Kong was covered in yellow fur, and there was a clump of golden hair on its head. Although it was clamoring, its eyes were filled with greed as it looked at the small building. Obviously, it wanted to take it for itself. A high-level demon, venerable. Old Eaglehead's heart trembled slightly. The great Pung circling above his head and the King Kong blocking the door both had auras much stronger than his. Although Old Eaglehead was a middle-level demon venerable, he was no match for these two opponents. We are here on Princess Ruo Ling's orders. Why? Are the princess's orders not effective? Qin Hao looked up at the giant rock and then at the 6-armed King Kong at the door of the courtyard. Before they came, the guards of the sacred city had said not to cause trouble. Qin Hao had just escaped from the danger of the sword world and had escaped the search of the divine Zhao generals. Naturally, he did not want to cause trouble. Therefore, he used Princess Ruo Ling's name to scare the 2 high-level demon venerables away. Princess Ruo Ling, the giant rock, and the King Kong's expressions changed. Ruo Ling was the daughter of Emperor Lo. Who was Emperor Lo? He was the highest ruler of the sacred city and had the power to control the life and death of everyone here. Upon hearing Ruo Ling's name, the giant rock and 6-armed King Kong were very wary. If the 2 of you have nothing else, please leave. I don't have anything to entertain you here. Qin Hao said to the giant rock and 6-armed King Kong, chasing them away. Since it is the princess's wish, there is no problem for you to build a house here. However, that is another matter. It is wrong to cut down my sacred tree. The giant rock spat out a sharp voice. Clearly, he was not ready to give up. This piece of land is mine. Six-armed King Kong lifted his big golden head and pointed at the ground under Qin Hao's feet. Clearly, he was not willing to give up either. Then what do the two of you think we should do? Qin Hao smiled and asked in a low voice. Since the princess allows you to stay, you can stay. Why did you have to cut down my tree? How about this? This house will belong to me in the future. I will not pursue the matter of cutting down the tree. The great rock spoke in human language. Soon after, a bright light flashed around its body, transforming into a human and landing in the courtyard without any trace of politeness. Chapter 21:39. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. He slapped the wooden wall of the pavilion with a little force. The sound of the slamming was very sturdy. He looked at the square window bars. The fine patterns carved on the wooden frame, due to sword intent, were especially beautiful. He then looked inside the main hall. There was a cloud carpet, a red-crowned crane screen, snow clouds in the sky, and painted vases. Decorations of all sizes decorated the pavilion in a unique and fresh style. The rock was more and more satisfied. The entire courtyard was like a blessing. Only an ordinary celestial sage could live here. It was grand and elegant. Not bad at all. The rock caressed a longevity lamp in the courtyard lovingly. His face was full of fondness. Seeing the rock's behavior, the six-armed King Kong sneered disdainfully. He said casually, I'm not interested in your house. Logically speaking, since Princess Ruoling allowed you to live here, I should do it. However, coming here is one thing, and rules are another. The demon race has its rules. What rules? Qin Hao asked. I'm in charge of handling the daily necessities of the demons in the territory of the green-winged blood python emperor. This place was originally a place to accumulate waste. Now that it's been occupied by you, my work will be difficult in the future. At the very least, you should take something valuable to comfort me. The six-armed King Kong stretched out an arm toward Qin Hao. Its big palm was in front of Qin Hao. Its meaning was obvious. This guy wants some benefits. Qin Hao knew that the six-armed King Kong was actually a waste manager under a demon emperor. Now that they had occupied this place, it had indeed increased the difficulty of other people's work. It was not too much to ask for some benefits. However, Qin Hao was in a difficult position. There were indeed many treasures in his storage ring. There were a few divine artifacts and countless divine herbs and elixirs. Usually, any one of them would be a fortune that the six-armed King Kong could not obtain in several lifetimes. Normally, it would not be a problem at all. However, now that he was in the massacre world, would he expose his identity if he took out the divine herbs and items nurtured by the heavenly Tao? That was unexpected. Who knew what kind of herbs were in the massacre world? Qin Hao had sealed his divine power and hidden the sky wheel. His divine consciousness could no longer detect them. He could not even take out a few herbs that were similar to the massacre world to cheat them. The eagle head and the three pig spirits were also looking at each other. Now that it was difficult for them to survive, why would they keep treasures with them? You don't. The six-armed King Kong's you. Other than this rule, there should be other rules to the demon race. Qin Hao rubbed his palms. Although the great Tao of nature was different in the untainted universe, there was always an iron rule between all the races. Fist. You got guts. All right, for Princess Ruoling's sake, I won't make things difficult for you. As long as you don't resist and stand here to receive 3 punches from me, I'll immediately turn around and leave if you can still stand after 3 punches. Six-armed King Kong's arms tightened at the same time. Is that the king? Is King Kong King translation? King, no. The eagle head came up to stop him. That's right, little brother. It's not good for you to take his fist. Let me do it. Among the 3 pig demons, the pig boss, who was the strongest, stood out. He had seen how Qin Hao killed the sin-refining Pope with a single thought. He was not worried about being injured by the six-armed King Kong. However, it was not suitable. The six-armed King Kong's demon rank was too low. It would dirty Qin Hao if he took a punch from a useless minion. It's okay, Qin Hao said. If it was the pig boss, he would not be able to take it. If you want to fight, go outside. Don't damage my courtyard. The rock's voice was heard. He waved his hand at Qin Hao and the six-armed King Kong as if he was chasing them away. Qin Hao turned to look at the youth in the form of the rock. What did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Whose courtyard was it? You are really shameless. Little Tanuki mumbled. The rock's sharp eyes looked over and said to little Tanuki, say it again. You are shameless. So what if I say it again? Qin Hao took 2 steps forward. The rock also took 2 steps closer to Qin Hao. He smiled slowly. Don't think that I won't dare to attack you just because you are a human. Don't think that I won't dare to kill demons just because this is the demon race's territory. Qin Hao's tone gradually turned cold. Buzz. The giant rock raised its arms, and a violent gust of wind suddenly descended from its arms, sweeping towards Qin Hao. Suddenly, the gust of wind whistled, and the killing will in the wind was bone-chilling. It was as if there were countless blades flying around in the courtyard, all of them slashing towards Qin Hao in a concentrated manner. At this moment, the rock, who had transformed into a human, was like a rock flapping his wings. His aura was astonishing. Qin Hao stood quietly in place. He did not move at all. He faced the bone-chilling gust of wind that swept over and bombarded his body. It caused his clean robes to flutter. However, after the gust of wind raged, Qin Hao's clothes were still clean. Not to mention wounds, there was not even a speck of dust on his body. Boom! The rock let out a sharp cry and soared into the sky. Its human body transformed back to its original form. Its claws were like hooks. It flew down and stomped on Qin Hao's head to kill him. This time, Qin Hao made his move. He stepped into the air, and amidst the surprised cries of the monsters, he actually arrived first. His figure cleverly dodged the giant rock's claws, and his fist landed on a rock's neck, going through its jaw and penetrating its skull. Bang! Blood mist filled the air. Immediately, a huge black beast body fell. The headless rock's body crashed outside the courtyard, causing the mountain and the courtyard to tremble. The whole world fell silent. Gulp! The arms on the shoulders of the six-armed King Kong were still clenching their fists. However, they swallowed hard. Their eyes were filled with shock. It was fine if they did not move, but if they did, they would be killed instantly. It's your turn. Qin Hao's body that was floating in the air slowly landed on the six-armed King Kong. He was indeed running for his life, but it did not mean that he could be bullied. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry could behave atrociously under his nose. Ignorant demons. Did they really think that they were June and Mo? Expert, please spare my life. Expert, please spare my life. Plop. The six-armed King Kong knelt down and faced Qin Hao, who was coming down on its head. Its 6 arms were all prostrated on the ground and begged for mercy. That punch had scared it out of its wits. That's right, that was the rule. Looking at the waste manager who was kowtowing at his feet, Qin Hao felt helpless. He said, I only asked you to punch me 3 times. This will be over. I don't want to kill you. This. The 6-armed King Kong gathered its courage and raised its head carefully. Is this okay? This is very good. Rules are rules. Rules cannot be broken. Qin Hao understood the waste manager situation. If everyone was like him, the 6-armed King Kong would have a hard time. Therefore, he had to punch him 3 times. Even though they were living in the dark, Ali and the others could not help but cover their mouths and laugh. They had never seen someone like Qin Hao. Our guest personality is really unique. Eaglehead chuckled. He did not feel any killing intent towards the 6-armed King Kong from Qin Hao. Perhaps it was because the latter did not go overboard. Dapeng was different. He bullied Qin Hao without hiding anything. In the end, he was killed by Qin Hao without any hesitation. An eye for an eye. Looking at Qin Hao's serious face, 6-armed King Kong crawled up from the ground shakily and reached out a fist in fear. A trembling finger stretched out from between his clenched fingers and gently pressed on Qin Hao's chest 3 times, indicating that the 3 punches were over and the matter was over. Did you know that the people who poked my chest in the past are no longer around? Qin Hao sighed at the 6-armed King Kong. Ghost. The 6-armed King Kong's 6 arms protected the tuft of golden hair on its head at the same time. The six-armed King Kong turned into smoke and disappeared outside the courtyard, as if it was escaping. The group of mountain apes that followed it were long gone. No wonder it ran so fast. It was abandoned by its own kind, Big Boar said naively. Chapter 2140. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The silver-haired young man obviously had a powerful cultivation and could kill six-armed King Kong with one punch, but he did not force it to follow the rules. The Golden Apex King forced itself to poke him 3 times, but Qin Hao said something so terrifying that six-armed King Kong was traumatized. Demon. The silver-haired young man must be a demon that only existed in the Nether Devil world. He was a spirit that crawled over from the Yellow Springs world. The disciples of the Sin Refinement could kill people with one strike, but after Qin Hao showed his power, he forced six-armed King Kong to violate his dignity. After that, he threatened six-armed King Kong verbally so that six-armed King Kong would live in fear all day long. The Golden Apex King suffered great torment physically, mentally, and spiritually. It would rather be killed by the disciples of the Sin Refinement than face Qin Hao again. That guy was more ruthless than a demon and more perverted than the disciples of the Sin Refinement. He was a messenger sent by the god of massacre to spread haze in the troubled world. The Golden Apex King left. It was said that it ran to the front line of the Celestial Wall in the middle of the night, crying and begging the guards to take it in. It was willing to sacrifice everything to stop the disciples of the Sin Refinement. After this incident, the courtyard in the demon area became much quieter. At least for a long time, no other demons came to find trouble. Has it left? Qin Hao sat in the room and meditated. Yes, the Sacred City guard who came to investigate didn't say anything. He glanced at the giant rock's body and left directly. Eaglehead replied. Chaos in the demon area was normal. The death of a venerable realm demon bird was not a big deal. The forest on the mountain was often cut down by other demons, but the giant rock did not come out to denounce them. However, it was different when it came to Qin Hao. The giant rock was obviously bullying the newcomers. Eaglehead and Pig Demon's cultivation were lower, so the giant rock was sure to kill them. Unexpectedly, it paid the price. There's food and clean water in the storeroom. You could take a bath in the side rooms on both sides. Let Li and Brother Zhu wash up and change into new clothes to get rid of the smell on their bodies. You can cook whatever you want to eat. It's best if everyone stays in the courtyard if there's nothing important. I need to meditate for a while, Qin Hao said with his eyes closed. He had more or less arranged everything in the courtyard and even set up a small formation outside. Because he had plenty of items in his storage ring, most of them left behind from his time in the mortal world, he had everything he needed for daily use. Thus, Old Eagle and the others did not need to go out. All right, Old Eaglehead nodded. Seeing that Qin Hao was concentrating, he left with light steps. Now that they had reached the Exalt realm, they no longer needed food and water. In the past, they had cooked for the sake of taking care of orphans. Now that they had nothing else to worry about, it was time for Old Eagle and the others to return to their positions and focus on cultivation. They had to absorb energy from the slaughter Tao intent in the world and strive to become as strong as possible. After all, the flames of war were not extinguished, and the holy city was not safe. No one could predict the fate of the continent. In the following days, Qin Hao cultivated in peace and sensed the slaughter Tao intent in the heavenly Tao. He wanted to integrate into the slaughter world as soon as possible and become a true slaughter Tao cultivator. This was something he had to do. As for the reincarnation mirror, Qin Hao did not use it for the time being. According to Old Eaglehead, Emperor Lu of the Holy City was probably at the Nirvana realm. The false divinity was very close to the divine Tao. If Qin Hao took out the reincarnation mirror to cultivate, the other party would definitely sense the aura of the divine item. He was afraid that it would attract the cross god, the controller of the heavenly Tao, and add to his troubles. Now, Qin Hao had to be careful with every step he took. The slightest mistake could cause him to be consigned to eternal damnation. The price of his life was too heavy. Completely emptying himself and forgetting everything about his previous cultivation, Qin Hao meditated in the room like a martial artist who had just entered the martial Tao. He sensed the existence of Tao intent and allowed the slaughtered Tao intent in the world to slowly invade his body and mind. He needed to cultivate the Tao like Mujan. Perhaps this was very slow and definitely not as fast as opening the heavenly wheel of the divine Tao and directly taking the will of the heavenly Tao. However, this was more beneficial to his safety. A medicinal fragrance filled the air. The small room was filled with a cold intent. Qin Hao took out a bowl of medicinal water from the medicinal pot and drank it. This was a medicine unique to the slaughter world. As soon as it entered his throat, a scorching heat spread throughout his body. However, his mind felt a bone-piercing cold. In that instant, Qin Hao felt that the slaughter aura flowing in the air had become clearer. No matter where I am, elixirs are indeed the fastest shortcut to cultivation. Qin Hao was very satisfied with his results. After more than a month, he was still far from the slaughter Tao intent emitted by Mujan. However, at least ordinary people could no longer see that he was an outsider. Now his aura slightly moved, and the cold slaughter Tao intent emitted from his body was no different from the cultivators in the holy city. Whoosh! A wisp of red lotus fire rose from his fingertip. The blood-red devil flame emitted an extremely high temperature. However, within this scorching qi, there was a faint trace of coldness. Even Qin Hao himself could feel it and couldn't help but be surprised. Whether it is space that is integrated into the sword Tao or the sword Tao that is integrated into space, this is the question. Qin Hao recalled the words of his teacher, the blind sword. Back then on the Su sword peak, he didn't quite understand it. But now, he could understand the blind sword's intention. There were tens of thousands of Tao in the heavens, and the great Tao was interconnected. If one could see through the falsehood, there was actually no Tao of tens of thousands of Tao. There was only one Tao of cultivation. Tens of thousands of Tao were just different paths. In the end, there was only one Tao. Benevolent killing is to use benevolence to fight against unbenevolence. Stopping killing is to use killing to cut off killing. Bloody killing is about the ultimate slaughter. In the end, no matter which Tao of slaughter the world of slaughter is, the end point is the same. Qin Hao extinguished the fire at his fingertip, straightened his clothes, stretched, and stepped out of the room. The moment he stepped out of the main building, Qin Hao turned to look at a side room. He saw that the room was surrounded by purple Yao Qi, and in Qi mixed with killing intent was growing stronger and stronger. Invisibly, as if a barrier had been broken, old Eaglehead's hearty laughter resounded in the room. Rank 8 Demon Venerable. Qin Hao faintly smiled as he saw old Eaglehead step out. That ugly Eaglehead had long since disappeared. Now, standing before him was a gray-haired elder of about 60 years of age. In human attire, his appearance was no different from that of a normal person. Greetings, Supreme Venerable. Old Eaglehead slightly bowed to Qin Hao, unable to conceal the joy on his face. Congratulations, Qin Hao said. It's all thanks to Supreme Venerable's help. Otherwise, even after several decades, this lowly one still wouldn't have been able to reach this level. Old Eaglehead deeply bowed once more. Supreme Venerable, many thanks. A trifling matter, not worth mentioning. Qin Hao helped old Eaglehead up with one hand. There was no need to be polite. Supreme Venerable makes it sound so simple. In a little more than a month, Supreme Venerable has raised my cultivation by 3 whole ranks. In the past, in the age of peace and prosperity, who knows how many people seeking the Tao would have come to seek Supreme Venerable's guidance. Old Eaglehead sighed, looking at Qin Hao with a new emotion. Although he had respected Qin Hao before, that was only the respect a weakling had for an expert, a respect born from fear of martial prowess. But now it was different. This venerable realm came from the bottom of his heart, from the bottom of his heart, from the bottom of his heart. After all, old Eaglehead had never imagined that Qin Hao was also a refiner. In the world of slaughter, no matter where one was, refiners were extremely rare. It would not be an exaggeration to say that 1 in 10,000 was a refiner. It was precisely because of their rarity that refiners had a status above all other living beings in the world of slaughter. Anyone who encountered them would revere them. Chapter 2141. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio in the past month, other than cultivating in his room and comprehending the massacre Dao, Qinhao also went to the human territory and visited the market. The medicinal tea that he had just drunk and the pills that helped old Eagle Head break through were all obtained from the market. The herbs that grew in the slaughter world were indeed different from those in other planes. Whether it was their shape, characteristics, or even the quantity used to refine pills, they were vastly different from what Qinhao had done in the past. It required an extremely meticulous method to refine pills. He had tried the herbs many times, and only after several failures did he gradually figure out the way to refine the medicinal tea and pills that could increase the killing intent. In the market, there was not a single proper medicine shop. He found the herbs from various stalls and simple shops. Normally, these herbs were expensive. During the calamity of Fire Beacon, the various races prioritized their lives, and the value of these herbs dropped. Moreover, there were pitifully few refinement masters. There were only a few in the Holy City. Therefore, when Qinhao gathered a few shop managers and stall owners and let them witness his refining process, he gave each of them a small portion after the pills were completed. These herbs were basically wasted. It was fine that they did not pay, but the shop managers and stall owners were very grateful to Qinhao. From doubts to threats, they were full of passion and admiration. They were just short of kneeling and acknowledging Qinhao as their ancestor. If not for the fact that Qinhao was young, they would have even called him Grandpa. After that, it was much simpler. The shop managers and stall owners were in charge of collecting rare herbs, while Qinhao was in charge of refining. After that, they would split the profits fairly. Both parties cooperated very happily. Now, the name of Great Master Qin had gradually spread in the few markets in the human territory. Many cultivators were eager to see him in person. Refinement Master, Medicine Refinement Master. Although there is a difference in one word, there is a world of difference. Qinhao smiled and sighed. The cultivation atmosphere in the massacre world was very strong. The individual strength was also strong. This was undeniable. However, the standard of medicine refinement was extremely poor. It was too far behind the other planes and could not even compare to the divine wilderness continent. Moreover, the standard of medicine refinement was very simple. This was very normal. After all, this place mainly cultivated the Tao of slaughter. The individual strength was the true strength. Especially when the flames of war fell from the sky, there was almost no room for the weak to survive. Now, those who survived were all capable humans or demons. Looking at the entire holy city, there were tens of millions of people, and the average cultivation level was in the revered realm. Other than those who came from powerful families or had extremely good luck, there were hardly any ordinary people, except for the few orphans adopted by Eagle Head. From this, it could be seen how lucky those orphans were to have met the Eagle Head. What are you sighing about, Supreme Venerable One? Old Eagle Head inquired like an old servant concerned about his master. It's nothing. Qinhao smiled. Chong Li and the few pig demons sensed that old Eagle Head's aura had become stronger and ran out to congratulate him. With Qinhao's help, they were slowly transforming. Among them, old Eagle Head's improvement was the most obvious. He was only one step away from becoming a demonic emperor. Chong Li and the pig demon had also entered the middle venerable stage. They were about to be able to completely transform and break away from their demonic beast bodies. As they chatted, Qinhao could vaguely see the facial features of a beauty who was about to transform from the outline of Chong Li's smile. He could also see the thick and honest faces of eldest pig, third pig, and fourth pig. Probably because they were fat, even if they transformed into human form, they could not get rid of their original foundation. The rumors in the market say that Great Master Qin is mysterious and unfathomable. Who knows how many people look up to him? Who would have thought that he would live here and smile so happily? A group of figures walked in from outside the courtyard. Their orderly footsteps were mixed with the crisp sound of armor. Just by hearing their voices, one could tell that they were extraordinary. Princess. Qin Hao stepped forward and cupped his hands. It was Emperor Li's daughter, Ruo Ling of the Holy City. We pay our respects to the princess. Eaglehead and the other demons bowed respectfully. Ruo Ling first glanced at the demons and realized that each of them had changed. Their auras had become much stronger. After that, she stared at Qin Hao's face with great interest. She could not take her eyes off him, and her smile deepened. If there's nothing on my face, then the princess is interested in me? Qin Hao joked. How dare you? The face of the dignified, middle-aged man darkened. The expression of the short-haired youth behind him also turned ugly in an instant. Princess Ruo Ling waved her hand casually at the dignified, middle-aged man, indicating that it was fine. She smiled and said, Qin Hao, oh Qin Hao, you are really capable. Besides possessing the power of flames, you are also a rare refinement master. If cultivators of flames were rare, then refinement masters were truly rare. Regardless of whether it was before the fire beacon or during the fire beacon calamity, the massacre world had always lacked refinement masters. When she heard of great Master Qin in the market, Ruo Ling immediately thought of Qin Hao, who asked his name to be so special and rare. Now that she saw him and smelled the medicinal fragrance from the pavilion, Ruo Ling could not help but look at Qin Hao in a different light. Just a mere refinement master. Not worth mentioning, Qin Hao said humbly. The short-haired youth snorted coldly. Brother, you are going overboard if you continue like this. Refinement masters are extremely rare. In normal times, they're all prominent figures. In the fire beacon calamity, the existence of refinement masters is even more precious. Sorrow, who had always carried an air of wisdom, said, Qin Hao, follow me to the imperial palace to meet my father, Ruo Ling said. Princess, don't be so direct. I'm not ready yet. Qin Hao joked. Those who did not know better would think that Ruo Ling was bringing her son-in-law back to meet Emperor Lu. There was an 80% chance that Emperor Lu wanted to meet Qin Hao. Junior, watch your words. The dignified, middle-aged man's gaze became even sharper. Qin Hao glanced at the middle-aged man, flicked his sleeves, and turned. Take care. I won't send you off. You. The middle-aged man pointed at Qin Hao's back and clenched his teeth in anger. Seeing this, Sorrow quickly stepped forward and placed his palm on Qin Hao's shoulder. He leaned closer and whispered, Brother, you are too much. The princess is a princess after all. She has repeatedly invited you to the imperial palace. You didn't even give her face. If it were anyone else, they would be begging for it. Sorrow patted Qin Hao's shoulder twice and transmitted, Even if it's not for yourself, you have to think about the demons in the courtyard. Sorrow retreated after speaking. He did not mean to threaten and was just stating the situation as it was. Qin Hao had chosen to live under someone else's roof. How could he make trouble for the owner of the holy city? It was rare for Ruo Ling to invite Qin Hao more than once. All right, I will follow the princess. I have something to consult Emperor Lu about. Qin Hao noticed the change in old Eaglehead's expression and also felt that Chong Li and the others were a little uneasy. I'm just helping you. I'm not forcing you. In fact, whether you go or not is none of my business. Ruo Ling turned and left coldly. She was not in a good mood. She felt as though she was forcing Qin Hao, and that was not her intention. Princess. Tomo Ge quickly chased after Ruo Ling. His short yellow hair swayed gently with his footsteps. Let's go. Sorrow secretly gave Qin Hao a look. The princess was angry. Qin Hao smiled helplessly and left the courtyard with the guards, heading towards the imperial palace in the center. In this month or so, Sorrow often came to visit him. They had gradually become familiar with each other. In fact, Sorrow was the first to know that Qin Hao knew alchemy. Sorrow was also present when he concocted the medicine in front of the shop owners. Otherwise, how could Qin Hao convince the local bullies of the market to give up their medicine for free. Chapter 2142. Sorrow was Emperor Li's disciple and had been under Emperor Li's tutelage since the beginning. It was similar to the sect examination, and he had stood out from tens of thousands of people. He was very talented and intelligent. Now, he was the princess' personal guard captain, an 8th-tier Renhuang, and about to become an emperor. The yellow-haired youth was called Tomo Go, and he was the direct disciple of the dignified middle-aged man. They were uncle and nephew, and were Emperor Li's trusted subordinates. In Sorrow's words, Tomo Go had always been interested in Ruo Ling, and had always been working hard for her. It was a pity that Princess Ruo Ling did not like him. Soon, the group arrived at the central palace. The palace was strict, solemn, and full of armored soldiers. Those moving about were mostly lower-tier Renhuangs. From this, one could see that the cruel baptism of war had pushed the cultivation world to a pinnacle of no return. Either you become stronger, or you die. The layout of the palace was similar to that of the emperor's faction in the Divine Wilderness, where Qin Hao was. Only the architectural style was different. Many of the palaces were circular, while the houses in the Divine Wilderness continent, where Qin Hao was from, were mostly rectangular and had pillars that resembled a spine. Emperor Li's palaces were all circular stone castles. They were very magnificent. "Father, I brought him here. You might not know, but this guy is a rare refinement master." Ruo Ling led Qin Hao straight to Emperor Li's bedroom. Sorrow was there too. Tomo Gu and his uncle were left outside the bedroom. Although they had some status, they were not qualified to enter Emperor Li's bedroom. Sorrow was different. He was Ruo Ling's guard, and also Emperor Li's disciple. Oh, that's surprising. In the bedchamber, a slightly plump figure stood up from a luxurious crystal chair. He wore a dazzling crown on his head and was dressed in a golden robe. When he walked, he had a strong aura. His aura was faintly diffused, and it contained an extremely strong sense of oppression. Qin Hao looked up and could not help but gasp. From old Eagle Head's explanation of the continent's trends, Qin Hao had thought that Emperor Lu, an 8th-tier Nirvana cultivator, was a false immortal. Now that he had seen the Lord of the Holy City, he realized that he had underestimated the Lord of the Holy City. He is already a true god. No, he is still lacking something. After Qin Hao arrived at the Holy City, he hadn't used his consciousness to investigate. At this close distance, he could feel the aura coming from Emperor Lu. He was already at the 9th tier of Nirvana and had perfected his laws. He could ascend to immortality, forge the heavenly wheel, and become a true god. But Emperor Lu was one step away. Divine Tribulation Baptism. Without passing the Divine Tribulation and experiencing the heavenly might, one would not be able to forge the heavenly wheel. Cultivator Qin Hao greets the Lord of the Holy City. Qin Hao made a feigned bow. He could not understand why Emperor Lu did not undergo the heavenly wheel. Or perhaps there was some reason that caused Emperor Lu to not undergo his immortal tribulation. When Emperor Lu saw Qin Hao, he was slightly taken aback. Then he smiled and said, "No need for formalities. My daughter said that she met a cultivator outside who had the fire massacre. After more than 300 years of killing, there are very few cultivators who have the fire Dao ability." Ruo Ling turned to Sorrow and said, "He is also an immortal refinement master. Father, let me tell you, the demons who entered the holy city with him had their cultivation levels raised by several tiers in a short month." Sorrow. Cough, cough. Sorrow smiled sheepishly at Qin Hao. That's right. He had indeed betrayed Qin Hao. He had no choice. He said, replying to Emperor Lord, "What the princess said is true. Your disciple saw Brother Qin Hao concoct a medicine that boosts the killing intent. With that medicine, a few puny lower-tier demon venerables broke through consecutively in a short period of time. Now, one of them has completely transformed and broken free of his beast form to become an upper-tier demon venerable. I made friends carelessly. How sad." Qin Hao lowered his head and sighed deeply. This sorrow had revealed everything to him without hiding anything. What a shameless person. Ha ha ha, don't blame him. This child Sorrow was originally my disciple. He is loyal to me. Nothing in the holy city, big or small, can escape his eye of wisdom. Emperor Lu laughed heartily. I see. It seems like I have underestimated Brother Sorrow. Qin Hao understood from Emperor Li's words that Sorrow held considerable authority. At the very least, he had a force that could monitor the entire holy city. As for the Tumo Gu and his nephew outside, it seemed like they were still a level below Sorrow. Kiki, if that wasn't the case, how could I have easily led you to the medicinal herbs scattered throughout the city? Brother Qin Hao, don't worry. I have no ill intentions. As long as you're not a member of the cult of sin, your private actions do not violate the rules. Monitoring the holy city is only my duty. After all, it's too chaotic, Sorrow said. Qin Hao nodded. He agreed with this point. It would be strange if the human race and demon race were not chaotic when they lived together. The holy city needed a force to operate in the dark. Come, let me see your fire, Emperor Li said. He also moved closer to Qin Hao. Whoosh! Qin Hao activated his fire will. A blood-red tongue of flame emerged from his fingertip. The dark red luster was filled with murderous intent. The scorching heat was mixed with a chill that made one shudder. It was as though it had come from the depths of hell. It is indeed a rare fire of massacre. The fire will is also very domineering. Emperor Li nodded. Actually, he had already received Sorrow's message. When he was investigating the remnants of the fire on the ground, Sorrow had secretly sent an image of the wilderness into Emperor Li's Empyrean will. Ruo Ling looked at the fire at Qin Hao's fingertip and frowned slightly. She could feel that it was different from the red lotus fire she had seen for the first time. It was not just the cold, murderous intent in the fire. As for what had changed, she could not pinpoint it. In any case, Ruo Ling was sure that the two were definitely different. Ruo Ling, you and Sorrow can leave first. I have something to discuss with this young man. Emperor Lu maintained a smile, but his tone had changed slightly. It was as though he was giving orders to the two of them. Yes, father. Ruo Ling had wanted to show off Qin Hao's refining skills to her father, but he had actually asked her to leave first. Boring. Yes, Emperor Lord. Sorrow glanced at Qin Hao and then left the bedroom with the princess. Bam! As soon as he stepped out, the two doors of the bedroom were shaken by a force and sealed tightly. Unknowingly, a strong aura enveloped the entire bedroom, completely isolating it from the outside world. Qin Hao turned back to look at the heavily shut doors. His puzzled gaze landed on the lord of the holy city. Vaguely, he felt a sense of danger. His seal god power was released, and the hidden sky wheel was ready to be released at any time. If this fatty before him discovered a secret that he should not know, Qin Hao would try to kill him in one blow. Relax, I'm not a believer of the Trident God, and I don't have the slightest bit of faith power in the heavenly Tao. Everything here can be blocked even by the heavenly Tao. Guest, where did you come from? Emperor Lu asked calmly. He was not in a hurry for Qin Hao's answer. He actually dragged his bloated body and slowly sat back down on the throne, leaving his back completely open to Qin Hao. As expected, Qin Hao took a deep breath. The other party had seen through him. However, Emperor Li's words and unguarded actions had dispelled Qin Hao's urge to kill him, to silence him. I was forced to stay here for a period of time. I will not interfere with the fire beacon calamity. Qin Hao extinguished the fire at his fingertips. If he wanted to, he was more than 90% confident that he could make Emperor Lu disappear instantly without triggering any abnormalities in the heavenly Tao. Chapter 2143. In the bedroom, the Lord of the Holy City and Qin Hao stared at each other. This is not a good place to stay temporarily, Emperor Lu said. If not for the fact that I was forced to kill, I would not have come here. Qin Hao looked helpless. Did he think he was willing to be dragged here by the mirror of samsara? Then what do you intend to do next? Emperor Lu asked. Wait for the fire beacon to extinguish, then leave as soon as possible and cross the massacre world. Qin Hao made his attitude clear. He had no intention of causing trouble. Emperor Lu smiled. That won't be easy. Also, let me tell you something. If you're not a god of the massacre world, you can forget about crossing the world. Why? Qin Hao frowned and asked, "The massacre god, Lord, will not allow it." Emperor Lu answered decisively. Qin Hao fell silent and said, "What if I become a god of the massacre world?" Emperor Lu smiled and shook his head. "The ruler of the heavenly Tao here will not give you the chance. Then I will overthrow the fork god." Qin Hao's eyes flashed with a vicious glint. Emperor Li's heart skipped a beat. "No, no. Why not? Aren't you lacking a divine tribulation?" Qin Hao looked at Emperor Lu and smiled. If he was not wrong, Emperor Lu was at the full nirvana realm. It was not that he did not want to undergo a divine tribulation. It was because he wanted to cross it. What if he gave Emperor Lu a chance to undergo a divine tribulation? Outside the bedroom, Salo, Tomo Ge, and his nephew were all waiting. Princess Ruoling was bored to death as she looked at the sky. She saw that the dark rain that had covered half the sky seemed to be getting closer to the holy city. While she was bored, there was also a hint of worry on her face. No one knew what Qin Hao and Emperor Lu talked about. They went in for a few days. It was only when the closed doors opened that Qin Hao returned to everyone's sight. The two men actually chatted for so long. When Princess Ruoling saw Qin Hao again, her face was full of confusion. She hurried into the palace. Even though she believed that Qin Hao had no chance of threatening or harming Emperor Lu, she still went to check on her father immediately. "Looks like Brother Qin Hao and the Emperor Lord are fated," Salo said with a smile. "That's right. It's a shame we didn't meet earlier. I'll have to trouble Brother Salo to bring me back." Qin Hao had been away from the courtyard for a few days, and he was somewhat worried about the few little demons. "All right," Salo said, walking side by side with Qin Hao. After all, the imperial palace was not a place where ordinary people could freely enter and leave. The oppressive middle-aged man gave Tomo Ge a look. Tomo Ge quickly caught up and said, "I'll also send Great Master Qin off." The three words, Great Master Qin, came out of Tomo Ge's mouth very heavily. However, Qin Hao did not pay attention to it. "What did Great Master and Emperor Lu talk about?" Tomo Ge asked curiously. It had been a full 3 days. "What was there to talk about? You seem to be particularly concerned about the private affairs of your own Emperor Lu. This is not a good habit," Qin Hao said to Tomo Ge with a hint of warning. Salo also looked at Tomo Ge silently. The light of wisdom in his eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. "Be careful with your words." Tomo Ge's face darkened slightly. He transmitted to Qin Hao, "And I'm warning you. Don't have any thoughts about Ruoling. If not, you'll die a horrible death." Qin Hao suddenly stopped in his tracks. He silently turned to the side and stared at Tomo Ge. "What's wrong?" Salo asked when he saw Qin Hao stop. "Nothing." Qin Hao smiled slightly and resumed his stride. You can send him off." Tomo Ge turned back midway. He had not really intended to send Qin Hao off. He just wanted to warn him and teach him how to behave. "Did Tomo Ge secretly threaten you?" Salo asked with concern. If that was the case, he would report it to the princess and let her teach him a lesson. However, Qin Hao nodded nonchalantly. "No worries. He's just a small bug. He can't cause much trouble." After saying that, he led the way. Salo savored Qin Hao's words and felt that they were unfathomable. Vaguely, it was like the tone that Emperor Lu used to decide important matters. "No wonder you talk for so long. You seem to be similar to the Emperor Lu." Salo laughed silently and quickly caught up. Back in the demon district, he looked at the ruins of the courtyard. The home that he had painstakingly built was gone. The medicine pot left in the room that day was also gone. All the furniture was broken. Only the broken pieces of the medicine pot were not in the ruins. Clearly, it had been taken away in one piece. What Qin Hao was worried about had happened. "Where are Old Eagle and the rest?" Qin Hao shouted into the air. His face was filled with killing intent. His body overflowed with an especially cold aura that seemed to be able to freeze the space. However, the space was silent. No one responded. Immediately, Qin Hao grabbed at the air. A powerful palm pulled out the body of a beast from a nearby mountain. It was a mountain ape. The moment the suffocating force squeezed its head, the mountain ape let out a heart-wrenching scream. "Blood Python Emperor, captured by the son of the blood python emperor. Bang! Qin Hao threw the mountain ape to the ground and stepped into the air. He headed straight for the demon district, the highest demon emperor's territory. Brother, don't be rash. Salo was worried that Qin Hao would be at a disadvantage. He also stepped into the air and tried his best to chase after Qin Hao. However, he was shocked to find that he could not keep up with Qin Hao's speed at all. Blood Python Emperor, get out here. Qin Hao hovered domineeringly in the air, looking down on the Demon Emperor's territory. His ferocious voice swept out, causing the Demon Emperor's palaces to sway. He had no qualms about doing so. Emperor Liu was the strongest in the Holy City. When the strongest person became a cooperative partner, there was almost no one and nothing in Yinjua City that could threaten Qin Hao. Naturally, he had nothing to worry about. At this moment, the sound waves mixed with the true dragon's howl reverberated. Even without using any divine power, the terrifying sound waves still caused the blood of the demons to boil. Huge beasts flew out of the palaces one after another. In an instant, nearly 100 demon emperors appeared. Their twisted features and bloodshot eyes all indicated that they had been severely injured by the true dragon's howl. How arrogant! How dare you run into the demon district alone and behave so atrociously? Who exactly are you, Dash? Before he could finish speaking, a beam of blood-red light flashed past. The head of the demon emperor who had spoken fell from his neck to the ground. His corpse followed suit. Hiss! When Salo saw this, he sucked in a breath of cold air. A rank 8 demon emperor was an upper-level emperor. He could kill with a single sword strike and take away one's life and soul. When Salo looked at Qin Hao again, there was a complicated look in his eyes. The person before him was completely different from the one he had seen the first time. His terrifying aura was as deep as the sea. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. It was only now that Salo understood that Qin Hao had been hiding his cultivation level. In reality, he was shockingly strong. Whoosh! Salo exhaled and wiped the sweat off his face. He had been worried that Qin Hao would be at a disadvantage. Now, it seemed that his worries were unnecessary. But in the next moment, Salo began to worry for these demon emperors again. Irrelevant people scram. Qin Hao looked around at the demon emperors floating in the air. The Tao of massacre that he had been cultivating for more than a month had taken effect. The cold, murderous intent in his eyes sent chills down the demon emperor's spines. I am the blood python emperor. Then, a figure climbed up from one of the palaces and came before Qin Hao. The blood python emperor was wearing a red robe with python patterns on it. His fair facial features gave off a feminine feeling. His small eyes were particularly vicious. A small snake wrapped around his arm and around his shoulder. He was flicking his tongue at Qin Hao. Qin Hao did not speak. Instead, he looked coldly at the palace that the blood python emperor had flown out from. Grandmaster, please calm down. I already know what happened. My son coveted the Grandmaster's potion and made an unwise move, offending the Grandmaster's demonic servants. Now, they are under my protection and unharmed. The blood python emperor took the initiative to bow to Qin Hao. The demon emperor that Qin Hao had killed with a single sword strike was a rank 8 demon emperor. Although the blood python emperor was stronger and was already at the extreme of the emperor realm, he was not confident that he would be unharmed by Qin Hao's sword strike. The blood python emperor could feel that this human alchemist was stronger than him. Why aren't you bringing them out? The blood python emperor shouted at the bottom of the sky. Master, please calm down. It's all my fault. Please forgive me this time for the sake of my father. After a dignified command, many figures came out of the palace one after another. The leader was a young man of 17 or 18 years old. Because he had inherited the excellent bloodline of the blood python emperor, although he was only a lower-rank demon venerable, he had completely transformed into a human form and completely got rid of his beast body. At this time, the young man was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. Behind him, Eagle Head, Pig Head, and Chongli were brought out by a group of demon snakes with tails. Qin Hao looked over and saw Eagle Head covered in blood. Pighead's face was peeled off a layer of skin. Chongli's clothes were disheveled, and her hair was disheveled. Obviously, she had been humiliated. She was covering her face and crying, as if she did not dare to appear in front of Qin Hao again. You call this safety protection? Unscathed? Under Qin Hao's palm, a blood-red sword chi slowly formed and condensed into a sharp blood-red longsword. Master, the blood python emperor hurriedly said. Swish! As soon as the sword came out, a scarlet light fell. Even though the small snake on the blood python emperor's shoulder flew out like lightning to intercept it, the sword still penetrated the young man's body through the top of his head and penetrated the ground. With a boom, the ground suddenly collapsed, forming a ripple-shaped crater. The son of the blood python emperor fell into the crater with his eyes wide open in disbelief, as if he had never expected that Qin Hao would kill him so easily. After all, his father was here. How could a cultivator of the human clan dare to kill him? You, the blood python emperor, clenched his fists and then loosened them weakly. Looking at his son lying in a pool of blood, he could only let out a sad and bitter smile. His protective spiritual snake could not withstand the other party's sword and was cut open. This spiritual snake had cultivated with the blood python emperor for hundreds of years and had stepped into the ranks of demon emperors. If they really fought, it was not necessarily weaker than an 8th-order demon emperor. Even so, in the face of Qin Hao's sword chi, it was still as weak as a thin sheet of paper. What could the blood python emperor do? Brother, don't make a big deal out of it. Salo took a few steps forward and said. Killing the son of the blood python emperor was enough to give Eagle Head and the others an explanation. After all, he was just a small demon with weak cultivation. If Qin Hao continued to kill and killed the blood python emperor, it would cause chaos in the demon area, which would be very disadvantageous to the current situation of the sacred city. Because outside the city, there was still the ferocious Sin Refinement sect. Qin Hao glanced at Salo and saw that he was in a difficult position. Then he silently descended and came to the side of Eagle Head and the others. He said, Let's go home. Yes. Eagle Head responded with tears streaming down his face. Home? Did they still have a home? They couldn't even protect their house. However, with Qin Hao around, anywhere was home. With the help of several fox demons who were also in disheveled clothes, Lily followed behind Qin Hao with her hair disheveled. She kept her head down all the way and did not say a word. Chapter 2144. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. The elegant loft was rebuilt from the ruins. It was larger and more imposing than before. This time, no demons came out to stop the pig spirits from cutting the trees. After this battle, Qin Hao shocked the entire Demon Emperor territory. His 2 swords shook the entire demon district, and his name also shook the entire sacred city. Now, the demons around the loft had all moved away. In one night, the area of dozens of miles had become a forbidden zone. However, the newly rebuilt courtyard lost its former warmth. The joy of Eagle Head and the others could no longer be seen. Being captured by the blood python emperor's son had caused great harm to the small demons. After returning, Eagle Head, the pig spirits, and Chongli had all changed. Chongli locked herself in the house and did not go out. Although Boss Pig and the others still cleaned the courtyard diligently, after seeing Qin Hao, they lowered themselves even more. They did not even dare to raise their heads, as if they did not have the right to stand in front of Qin Hao. Even from far away, Qin Hao could feel the inferiority in the hearts of the pig spirits. That inferiority was like a mountain pressing down on them, making it hard for them to breathe. Living under the same roof as Great Master Qin, who could kill a demon emperor with one sword, how could they be worthy of living under the same roof? Eagle Head also became much quieter. Although he still communicated with Qin Hao on a daily basis, he did not speak much. Most of the time, he would nod or shake his head. When he opened his mouth, it would be 1 or 2 words. Yes, okay. These words came out of Eagle Head's mouth again and again. They sounded like a machine in Qin Hao's ears. However, there was one thing. Whether it was the autistic Chong Li, the taciturn Eagle Head, or the pig spirits, Once they finished cleaning the courtyard, they would immediately start cultivating. The desire to cultivate and become stronger, the kind of focus and drive that neglected sleep and food, was rarely seen even in human cultivators. Qin Hao understood that all of this originated from the attack in the Blood Python Palace. It was like when he was captured by Jun Mo and brought to the Tianjiao divine domain. Only by becoming stronger could Eaglehead and the others regain their sense of security. Otherwise, even if they stayed by Qin Hao's side all the time, they wouldn't be able to sense it. Chaos in the Demon District was normal, just like the chaotic world under the flames of war. On this continent, there were people and demons dying at every moment. Families separated, torture, abuse, and all kinds of tragedies were unavoidable. However, this kind of thing was magnified in front of Qin Hao. Otherwise, in the eyes of others, Chang Li's encounter would not be noticed at all. Who would care about their life and death? Other than providing medicine to speed up their cultivation, Qin Hao could not drag the demons out of the shadows. They had to rely on themselves. Recently, the Holy City's defense system had also undergone some changes. The rogue cultivators from the Massacre world retreated from the Sky Wall and the Crane defense line. Emperor Li's subordinates rushed to the front lines and took over the vanguard position. Among them, there was Mo's uncle, the dignified middle-aged man, leading the troops. The Sky Wall was the first line of defense. If the Sin Refinement cult attacked, the Sky Wall would definitely be the first to be attacked. Once they were sent to defend, they would basically be reduced to cannon fodder. Therefore, there was quite a commotion in the Holy City. Many people did not understand why Emperor Lu had removed the rogue cultivators and replaced them with the elites of the Imperial Palace. The rogue cultivators did not have the ability to survive alone in the flames of war. Therefore, they came to the Holy City to be protected by Emperor Lu. It was normal for them to be sent to the front lines to defend the Sky Wall. On the other hand, the elites of the Imperial Palace were the direct subordinates of Emperor Lu. How could Emperor Lu bear to use his subordinates who had followed him for so many years as cannon fodder? After the imperial order was issued, it was really incomprehensible. However, Emperor Lu was the supreme leader of the Holy City. No one dared to defy his decision. They could only obey. Soon, with the change of defense, the dark clouds on the other side of the sky started to move. The speed at which it swept towards the Holy City increased significantly. It seemed like the Sin Refinement cult had completely cleared the world outside the Sky Wall. Next, the Sin Refinement cult leader would stake everything and launch the final battle towards the Holy City. And this battle would determine the ownership of the continent. Who would extinguish the flames of war? Have you heard? The Sin Refinement cult has already launched an attack on the Sky Wall. Is that true? Of course it's true. Is it that fast? One of my cousins is stationed at the Sky Wall. A few days ago, he sent a letter back saying that the Sky Wall has been attacked by dozens of waves. Many Sin Refinement cult members have died. Oh my God, has this day finally arrived? In a simple wine shop in the human territory, a few people were eating and drinking at a table and discussing softly. They looked a little flustered and pale. At this moment, at the table next to them, a cultivator wearing a bamboo hat was listening quietly. As he drank, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Seems like the plan is working. Qin Hao casually threw down a bag of massacre currency. He pulled down his bamboo hat and left the wine shop silently. His figure gradually disappeared into an empty alley. Just as he and Emperor Lu had planned, after the rogue cultivators were removed from the Sky Wall and replaced with elites, the Sin Refinement cult was like a wild beast that had smelled blood. They gradually became impatient. However, the first few waves of attacks should be probing attacks. The cult master of Sin Refinement was definitely not an idiot, since he had such a huge family business. Even if he found a flaw in the Sky Wall, it was impossible for him to lead his cult members to charge indirectly. The Sin Refinement cult leader repeatedly confirmed that he was testing something. It was a pity that the Sin Refinement cult leader's intelligence had fallen into Qin Hao's trap. He believed that the other party would take the bait sooner or later. Therefore, according to the plan, Qin Hao had to prepare for the next step. "Where's Qin Hao?" "Ask him to come with me." In the courtyard, Ruo Ling led a large group of imperial palace guards in aggressively. She directly asked for Wu Yu, replying to Princess. "The Exalt left early in the morning and has yet to return. I wonder why the princess is looking for the Exalt. When he returns, I will immediately." Old Eagle Head did not finish his sentence. "Aya, so wishy-washy." Upon hearing that Qin Hao was not around, Ruo Ling immediately turned to leave. When she stepped out of the courtyard, she suddenly thought of something and turned back. "The few of you, take care. The sky wall might not be able to hold. If the Sin Refinement cult really charges in, it will all be up to fate." "What?" Old Eagle Head lifted his head and was shocked. "So soon?" Looking at Ruo Ling's departing figure, Old Eagle Head understood that the purpose of Princess Ruo Ling's visit this time was to bring Qin Hao along. If the sacred city could not be saved, then Qin Hao would undoubtedly be safer with Ruo Ling by his side. "Zhu De, Zhu San, Zhu Si, Li Li," Old Eagle Head shouted. "Dong!" The pavilion shook as figures appeared one after another. Including Old Eagle Head, there were a total of 8 people. Just like when they arrived at the sacred city, not a single one was missing. Looking at the familiar faces and feeling the improved demonic aura of each of them, Old Eagle Head said solemnly, "Get ready. Let's find the Exalt first. If we can't find him, we'll fight our way out." Ruo Ling's tone was very anxious. It was obvious that the sky wall was really about to be broken. Qin Hao's cultivation was unfathomable. In fact, Old Eagle Head was not too worried. If they could not meet up, he could only take Li Li and Zhu De and flee again. He hoped that this time, they could safely avoid this chaotic world. Rumble. The deafening sound seemed to come from the horizon. Although they did not know how far away it was, the sound was especially clear in every corner of the sacred city, shaking the hearts of everyone. In that instant, the entire Yinzhou city came to a standstill as the ground trembled. "The sky wall is broken. The sky wall is broken. Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. The sky wall is broken." The blood-soaked winged cavalry warriors flew above Yinzhou city. The shocking news of their defeat resounded in everyone's ears. It sounded so unbelievable. The heavenly wall, which was as thick as several mountain ranges and as wide as a heavenly moat, was broken through. Looking at the blood-drenched elites of Emperor Lu on the winged cavalry, the cultivators of the sacred city knew that this was not an illusion. A nightmare had really descended. In the next moment, the Sin Refining cult would pass through the defensive line and attack the sacred city. At this moment, looking down from tens of thousands of li above, the seemingly indestructible sky wall from the first line of defense had collapsed in several sections. Emperor Li's elite troops were retreating as they fought. Under the cover of the crane towers at the second line of defense, they retreated from the destroyed sky wall. The army was running for their lives towards a stronghold. Outside the sky wall, there was an endless number of Sin Refining cult members in black robes and wielding bloody blades. The towering cranes unleashed tremendous power. Dense rays of light containing intense killing intent radiated out. After the sky wall's defenders withdrew, they began to sweep back and forth. Any sinners who crawled in through the gaps were blasted into a bloody mist, directly evaporating without leaving behind a corpse. Judging from the power released by the second line of defense, it would not be difficult to stop the Sin Refining cult members. At the very least, it would not be difficult to delay them for a while. If the Sin Refining cult wanted to destroy the towers, they would have to use their emperors or their lives. Even human emperors would not be able to last long under the bombardment of the towers. However, a bizarre scene occurred. For some reason, the radiant towers began to extinguish, as though their insides were being invaded and destroyed. Screams of agony could be heard. Shortly after, the towers were drowned by the Sin Refining cult members pouring in from outside the skywall. It was as though they had sunk into a black sea. A cold drizzle began to fall from the sky. When the smell of blood spread through the towers, it began to sweep towards the strongholds. Finally, it stopped in front of the resplendent sacred city of the imperial court. Chapter 2145. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Sky Wall, Crane Tower, and Stronghold. The three main lines of defense have been breached. The defenders were forced to retreat again and again until they reached Yintawa City. They were relying on the city's defenses, which were far inferior to the Sky Wall, to put up a final struggle. In front of him, the disciples of the Sin Refinement sect covered the sky and covered the earth as they swept over. As far as the eye could see, it was like a boundless black tide that caused one to feel suffocated. It was drizzling in the sky, and the chill was bone-chilling. The smell of blood in the air was getting thicker. When the black tide of disciples pressed against the holy city, the stench of blood was so thick that it was rotting. It was as though the living beings in the city were heading towards death. Double-headed war horses lined up in a line. On the backs of the war horses sat slaughter knights in black crystal armor. In front of the slaughter knights stood war beasts. Their huge bodies stood upright, and some of them were as tall as Yintawa Holy City. They were like mountains that had sprouted from the ground. A boundlessly huge black Jiaozi slowly walked out from the boundless Sin Refinement sect members. It was carried by tens of thousands of people like a supreme platform of death and was placed at the forefront. Around the altar were countless slaughter emperors. Their powerful auras resonated, causing the ground to tremble slightly. It was as though the entire plane would be lifted into the sky if they moved together. There was only one figure on the altar. The Sin Refinement sect's sect master sat on a dazzling throne. Below his palms were two extremely transparent, luminous pearls that were also glowing brightly. At a closer look, the two luminous pearls that his fingers were tapping were clearly human skulls. Because their cultivation had been too strong when they were alive, their Tao intent had not dissipated after death and had been sealed within the skulls. Every tap of the Sin Refinement sect's sect master's fingers seemed to be interrogating the souls of the skulls. Instantly, mournful wails could be heard from below his palms. Emperor Lo, a calm voice came from the throne. The endless Sin Refinement army faced off against the millions of cultivators in the holy city. However, only the voice of the Sin Refinement sect's sect master could be heard clearly in this space. More than 300 years since the Divine Master had sent down the fire beacon, this plane had been slaughtering for more than 300 years. Originally, the Sin Refinement sect's sect master had thought that the continent's last competitor, Emperor Lu, would be able to last more than 400 years. But today, the fire beacon was coming to an end. Had he overestimated Emperor Lu, or was he simply too strong? Perhaps it was because Sin Refinement was too strong. After all, he was given the mission of ending the fire beacon from the very beginning. These are the heads of Emperor Min and Emperor Bone. They were once as strong as you. Today, I will add another expert's skull to my throne. The sect master of Sin Refinement's voice was filled with confidence. Apart from the skulls of the Min the Arch and the Skeleton the Arch, there were hundreds of skulls under his feet. These skulls were his honor, as well as the proof that he had extinguished the flames of war and established a great hegemony. Emperor Li's skull would become the brightest of these hundreds of bones. The sect master of Sin Refinement would polish it and hang it around his neck. This way, Emperor Li's remnant soul would always be his companion, spending time with him. Sinful refinement, your Tao is wrong. The Lord of the Holy City, who was wearing a loose golden robe and exuding a noble aura, stood at the top of the tallest city tower. He spoke to his mortal enemy as if he was talking to a friend. Kiki, the sect master of Sin Refinement, chuckled. He stood up slowly and grabbed a skull from the throne. As he walked, he played with it in his hands, listening to the wails coming from the skull. It sounded like a form of enjoyment. With a light tap of his feet, the sect master of Sin Refinement, who was wearing a loose black robe, floated into the air. He stood at the same level as the Lord of the Holy City. He pointed to the endless crowd behind him and said, "Look, outside that broken city wall, the entire world is black. Only you're cowering in the wall, struggling at death's door. You actually dare to tell me that my Tao is wrong? Benevolent Shah and bloody Shah. If benevolent Shah was right, then the one cowering in the city should be the sect master of sin refinement. In the end, who was in the wrong? Words are useless. Reality will prove everything," Emperor Le said. He walked out slowly from the top of the city tower and stepped into the air. He walked closer and closer to the sect master of sin refinement. "This battle is a personal contest between you and me. You and I both know that the winner becomes a god. Those below the divine Tao are ants. Therefore, this is just a contest between you and me." I agree with that. However, gods also need believers. I'm not a hypocrite like you. I'm very generous to my believers. Even if they disobeyed me in the past and even became my enemy, I still want to give them a chance to repent. Together, we can build a perfect paradise, the sect master of sin refinement said. Roar, roar, roar. War beasts hammer their chests. The massacre knight on the two-headed warhorse raised the black spear in his hand. The endless sect master of sin refinement cheered loudly. Everyone seemed to have fallen into a hysterical frenzy. It was as though they had fallen into the perfect paradise that the sect master of sin refinement had described. In the paradise of the sect master of sin refinement, they could do whatever they wanted. They were lawless. Emperor Lu looked down at the black tide pressing down on the city. His eyes were exceptionally cold. He knew that this group of living beings was beyond redemption. They no longer had a shred of humanity. All right, to save time and to protect my beloved believers now. The cult of sin's gaze swept past the city walls and warriors behind Emperor Lu. It was as though his will had descended upon the holy city, and he opened his arms to everything in the city. Give up everything you have and join the cult of sin. You will all become my children and fulfill any dreams you have in my heaven. Show your worth. This is the last chance I grant you to be reborn. Come, walk out from behind those fake walls and return to my side. I have your brothers and sisters behind me, and they are waiting for your return. Disgusting. Ruo Ling wanted to vomit. She had to admit that the sect master of sin refinement was very strong. He was also very good at seducing and brainwashing. He was a complete swindler. What does he mean? Aya, you are so stupid. Leave the holy city and join the sect master of sin refinement. Then you won't have to die. That's about it. He wants us to betray him? At this moment, the sect master of sin refinement's words echoed in the holy city. Tens of millions of cultivators and demons clenched their fists and were prepared to fight to the death. When they heard these words, they couldn't help but waver. At least they weren't clenching their fists so tightly anymore. Who wanted to die? No one wanted to die. In the current situation, the sky wall had been breached, the defensive line was destroyed, and the sect master of sin refinement was pressing down on the holy city. The entire world outside the city had turned black. Clearly, Emperor Lu was the weaker side. If they continued to fight stubbornly with Emperor Lu, only death would await them. And if they joined the sect master of sin refinement and became the children of the sect master of sin refinement, not only would they be able to survive, their futures were limitless. At this moment, the atmosphere in the holy city changed subtly. Actually, those who could come here, regardless of whether they were humans or demons, had all been persecuted by the sect master of sin refinement. Many of their relatives and friends had died at the hands of the sect master of sin refinement. They had once been driven mad by this and swore that they wouldn't rest until the sect master of sin refinement was destroyed. However, it was a pity. When their lives were threatened and they were about to reach the end, they suddenly realized that the persecutions they had suffered in the past were insignificant. The sect master of sin refinement had made the oath that they swore. Only when they were alive would there be endless happiness. If they couldn't live, what was the use of the oath? I wonder where the Venerable One is. Is he with Princess Ruo Ling? In the crowd, old Eaglehead tried his best to look around. He was unaffected by the sect master of sin refinement's bewitchment. In his mind, other than thinking about Qin Hao, there were only a few orphaned faces. This was his life. However, Old Eagle Head could still clearly feel the commotion in the crowd. He thought that many cultivators in the city would probably defect to the sect master of sin refinement soon. Come, my children, build an ideal world with me. In the future, you will realize that only in the sect master of sin refinement can you find your true selves and realize the value of life. Let us destroy the rotten holy city together and kill the sanctimonious Emperor Lu. Come, come. The sect master of sin refinement floated in midair and opened his arms to the air. His voice had a strong magical power. As it continued to attack the souls of the cultivators in the city, the commotion grew. Emperor Master. A martial emperor looked back along the city wall and realized that the city was about to lose control. A chaotic killing intent was erupting from every corner of the city. If they couldn't eliminate it, the elites of the imperial palaces protecting the holy city would probably fall at the hands of the cultivators in the city before the sect master of sin refinement could even attack. Let them go. Emperor Lu sighed. Whether it is the human race, the demon race, or my subordinates, you can all leave. Those who had lost their Tao hearts couldn't be kept. Even if they were forced to stay, they would become a disaster in the future. Rather than that, it was better to wipe them all out once and for all. Just as the sect master of sin refinement had said, Emperor Lu also wanted to build a perfect world. In Emperor Li's world, there would be no cruel way of killing. Emperor Lu. On the city wall, many imperial palace generals knelt down. Emperor Lu waved his hand and said calmly, "There is no need to be reluctant. Back then, you were willing to follow me because you wanted to survive. Now, the scales of survival are tilting towards the outside of the city. It is only natural for you to leave." No one knew the outcome of this battle, but currently, no one was optimistic about Emperor Li's chances. Even if Emperor Lu had the ability to persevere, what was the point of his subordinates losing their confidence? Let them go, give them freedom, and let them make a new choice. However, once you leave this wall, you will be an enemy of my killing path. There is no turning back. The city gates are wide open. A terrifying glint flashed across Emperor Li's eyes. In his mind, he recalled his conversation with Qin Hao. Since he had done it, he had to go all out. Chapter 2146. Wooling Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Who is the hero? The city gates opened on their own accord. Groups of cultivators and demons walked out of the city one after another, filled with anxiety and uneasiness. They headed towards the endless army of Sin Refinement sect. With the first person, there was a second, a third, until groups of 3 to 5 formed and the entire tribe left. Emperor Lu watched as more and more cultivators and demons walked out of the holy city and joined Sin Refinement sect. His gaze turned cold. Among them, there were many subordinates and aristocratic families who had followed him for many years. His heart turned cold, and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He did not know in the past, but today Emperor Lu finally understood what loyalty was and what feigned civility was. Those who abandoned me will not live on. It was good that they left. This way, he could eradicate the root of the problem and eliminate the dissidents. The sect master of Sin Refinement sect watched everything quietly. His smile grew wider and wider. Throughout the entire process, the Sin Refinement army stood their ground and did not attack when the holy city opened its gates. As time passed, more and more people walked out of the city. When no one left, the number of defectors was no less than 10 million, which was a quarter of the holy city's original strength. It seemed like there were no major casualties, but there were many of them. Moreover, there were the direct elites of Emperor Lu among them. This was far beyond Emperor Li's expectations, and it caused a ripple in his heart. If no one walks out of the city, I'll give the order to attack. Once the city is breached, I'll kill all of you. You better think carefully. Now, I'll give you one more chance. Walk out boldly, and I'll let bygones be bygones. 10 breaths. After 10 breaths, I'll give the order to attack the city." The sect master of Sin Refinement sect raised his arm slightly. Roar! The Sin Refinement sect army readied themselves and prepared to attack the city walls. At this moment, a few more people walked out of the city gates quickly and left without turning back. Vospor looked at Old Eaglehead silently. Old Eaglehead shook his head at a few small demons. They would leave, but not now, nor would they join Sin Refinement sect. After the city was breached, they would use their own strength to fight for a way out from the cracks of death. Perhaps the chances were slim, and perhaps none of the 8 small demons would be able to escape. But even if they were all dead, it was better than being fed by Sin Refinement sect. At this moment, the last person to the Sin Refinement sect master of the Sin Refinement sect master of the Sin Refinement sect. Seeing this scene, many Imperial Palace guards were enraged. Tomogu, Salo pointed at Tomogu below the city. Tomogu turned back to look and said coldly, "I'm not so stupid as to be buried with Emperor Lil like you. The Sin Refinement sect is the heaven that I yearn for. Salo, let me give you a word of advice. Leave together." Swoosh! Salo pulled out the scimitar at his waist and waved down a beam of saber light, slashing in front of Tomogu's feet. "Later, I will personally chop off your head." Tomogu smiled indifferently. Kill him? Salo had better think about how to survive first. Family misfortune. On the city wall, among the many emperors, Tomogu's uncle, a middle-aged man with a dignified face, closed his eyes. Beside him, many of Emperor Li's subordinates cast sympathetic glances at the dignified middle-aged man. As an elder, their hearts ached for a traitor like Tomogu. But luckily, the dignified middle-aged man was not as heartless as his nephew. "All right, Sin Refinement. Come, let's decide the victor between you and me. Let's see who will extinguish the flames of war. No matter the outcome, today's battle will be remembered by future generations." Emperor Lu floated forward, surrounded by the 9 realms' lights. His robes flashed with intense killing particles. The Sin Refinement sect master smiled and nodded. His 5 fingers exerted strength, and with a bang, he crushed the skull in his hand. He pinched the remnant soul that floated out of the skull and threw it at Emperor Lu. This wailing remnant soul was once a Nirvana great emperor. Before his death, his killing intent turned into a curse, and now the Sin Refinement sect master had thrown it at Emperor Lu. "Umph!" Emperor Lu snorted. His sleeves fluttered, and a terrifying killing emperor's light formed around him. That powerful palm slammed down, and the light particles devoured everything in front of it. The remnant soul was swept away, and the Emperor's light blasted towards the sect master of Sin. After Emperor Li's death, massacre the city. The Sin Refinement sect master gave a cruel order. Blood veins swam around his body like messy meridians. Bright red light burst out from his body, and the drizzle in the sky turned into a torrential downpour, mixed with the pungent smell of blood. Like a rain of arrows, they fell from the sky above the Sin Refinement sect master and pierced towards Emperor Lu. Kill! The emperors of the Sinful Refinement sect around the floating divine altar were the first to charge. Rays of Emperor light surged into the city wall. Behind them, the mountain-like war beasts pounded their chests and galloped. They carried countless monsters on their shoulders and followed the army of human emperors to break into the city. Boom! The Sin Refinement army on the ground surged towards the holy city like a tidal wave. Every Sin Refinement sect disciple's face was filled with hysterical madness and a strong desire to destroy. At the same time, the Holy City army also moved. They had nowhere to retreat, so they fought to the death. They launched a counterattack against the overwhelming Sin Refinement army. Tao of Emperors against Tao of Emperors, Demon Emperors against Demon Emperors, Human Emperor battle formations against Human Emperor battle formations. The entire world turned into an intense battlefield. As Emperor Lu waved his sleeves, terrifying killing light shot down, accurately hitting the Sin Refinement sect emperors. All who were hit by it were reduced to ashes. Many had died in front of the Holy City emperors before they even started fighting. The Sin Refinement sect master was unmoved. His mocking eyes showed that he did not care about the lives of his sect members. He controlled the rain of arrows, activating his emperor will to the extreme. Beams of indestructible blood-red light bombarded Emperor Li's protective aura. In the blink of an eye, his protective aura was shattered. Boom! Boom! For palms collided. When Emperor Lu and the Sin Refinement sect master closed in, terrifying shockwaves radiated from their bodies to the ground. On the torn ground, the galloping battle beasts fell one after another. Even the demons hanging from their shoulders were reduced to minced meat. The city walls of the Holy City also collapsed due to the shockwaves. The blood-red arrow rain landed on Emperor Li's body, corroding his noble emperor robe. It also penetrated Emperor Li's flesh. The Sin Refinement sect master's blood-red Tao of massacre was destroying everything Emperor Lu had, constantly weakening his benevolent killing emperor will. However, their palms did not separate from each other. They maintained their momentum, crazily bombarding each other with ice-cold killing particles. Pooh! Fresh blood flowed from the corner of Emperor Li's mouth. He stared at the Sin Refinement sect master, whose face was equally pale. He ignored the chaotic blood massacre law in his body and shook off his opponent's fist. His fat palm pressed forcefully against the Sin Refinement sect master's chest. When this palm landed, the Sin Refinement sect master's red robe was torn apart. The sound of emperor bones shattering could be heard in the air. A figure bent and flew backwards. Oomph. Emperor Lu was unwilling to give up. His bloated body did not affect his speed at all. Blood-red patches appeared on his fists, as eye-catching as birthmarks. Moreover, they were expanding rapidly. The chaotic blood massacre law in his body danced like venomous snakes. However, Emperor Lu did not care about any of this. He only had eyes for the Sin Refinement sect master. His fat fists chased after his opponent, constantly bombarding his injured body. In an instant, he had thrown over 1,000 punches, and all of them hit the same spot. Even though the Sin Refinement sect master was also at the Great Nirvana realm, he could not help but cry out in pain. Chapter 2147. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Seizing the Divine Tribulation. Obtaining the Heavenly Tao Bang. Bang, bang, bang. Boom. The fist shadows smashed down like meteorites. After 1,000 punches, Emperor Lu smashed the sect master of Sin Refinement from the sky to the ground, causing the ground to crumble. Countless Sin Refinement disciples were killed by the aftershock of the eggshell-like particles. Sect Master. The two Tao of Emperor Sin experts saw how ferocious Emperor Lu was and how their sect leader was being beaten into a corner. They immediately turned back and charged towards Emperor Lu, leaving 2 streaks of light in the air. Emperor Lu glanced at them coldly. These 2 Nirvana realm experts were close to the false, immortal realm. They were rare experts. Unfortunately, they were like mantises trying to stop a chariot. Emperor Lu stretched out his palm, and a dazzling brilliance appeared in his palm. It gathered into a domineering purple-gold halberd and slashed downwards. The halberd radiance that contained the benevolent emperor's killing Tao was extremely sharp. With a swoosh, a beam of white light flashed past. Before the 2 Nirvana realm cultivators could even get close, their bodies were sliced into 2 and their souls were destroyed. On the sunset peak, even the evil spirit couldn't withstand a palm strike from Qin Hao when he was at the false immortal realm. As for Emperor Lu, he had already perfected his laws. Other than the fact that he didn't have Tianlun and couldn't use the will of heaven, he was no different from a true god. How could an 8 Nirvana realm expert withstand it? Boom! The eggshell-shaped particles below were shaken off and dispersed, revealing a ragged figure. The cult master of Sin Refining was standing on the collapsed ground. His clothes were all torn and half of his body was missing. Through the bloody hole in his body, one could clearly see his damaged organs pulsating. The sect master of Sin Refinement raised his head slightly and stared at Emperor Lu, who was wielding a halberd. He had to admit that this fatty was indeed strong. If it were anyone else, be it the dead skeleton emperor or Min Emperor, no one below the perfected Nirvana realm could beat this fatty. When he thought up to this point, the sect master of Sin Refinement gnashed his teeth with hatred. Fortunately, he wasn't like the skeleton emperor and nether emperor. He had the noblest bloodline in this dimension, and he was born to extinguish the flames of war. No matter how strong Emperor Lu was, he was still an emperor. Bloody mist enveloped half of his body, and the light particles on his body prevented his injuries from worsening. The cult leader of Sin Refinement slowly rose into the air and reached the same height as Emperor Lu. As he chanted a cryptic incantation, the blood-red threads that wriggled on his body like earthworms intertwined and formed a huge scythe. That cold, gleaming blade was covered in blood. The rain became heavier, and an incomparably fishy stench began to permeate the air with the appearance of the blood scythe. Bolts of lightning exploded in the boundless sky, and a majestic and boundless pressure seeped out from the countless cracks. It was like a will that suppressed all living things, and it fell on the body of the sect master of Sin Refinement, causing his battered body to heal rapidly until it returned to its original state. As expected, seeing this, Emperor Lu sucked in a deep breath of cold air. He lifted his head to look at the endless sky. That falling will was clearly the might of heaven. Sect Master Sin Refinement was no ordinary person. He was a descendant of the Plain Overlord, a member of the Naga God clan. Originally, I thought that the heavenly Tao Overlord would follow the rules of the Divine Master and not interfere with the calamity of fire and beacon. Kiki. Emperor Lu shook his head and let out a sorrowful laugh. In this era of emperors, the cult leader of Sin Refinement had been born out of thin air. He had single-handedly created the mighty cult leader of Sin Refinement, and wherever he went, emperors would perish. It was impossible to say that the cult leader of Sin Refinement had no powerful backing. But how strong was the existence that had raised a Nirvana great emperor? There was no doubt that it was a god. At first, Emperor Lu was unwilling to admit it. But now, the truth was before his eyes. How dare the Naga god? How could he interfere with the calamity of fire and beacon? Are you saying that my ancestral god broke the rules? The cult leader of Sin Refinement held the huge blood scythe in his hand and waved it casually. At this moment, he was enveloped by the might of heaven, and he felt stronger than ever. Emperor Lu, who had severely injured him previously, now looked like an ant. If an enforcer breaks the law, isn't that breaking the rules? Emperor Lu said sarcastically, I think you have misunderstood the laws of the slaughter world. The Divine Master has ruled that the heavenly Tao Overlord cannot interfere with the calamity of fire and beacon. But that only restricts the Overlord. I grew up in the lower domain and trained myself step by step. I followed the will of the Divine Master and established the cult leader of Sin Refinement. How is it related to my ancestral god that I ended the calamity of fire and beacon? The cult leader of Sin Refinement said, Gods couldn't interfere in the affairs of the lower domain, but no one said that the descendants of gods couldn't. Was that breaking the rules? Shameless. Emperor Lu scolded. On the surface, it didn't seem like he had broken the rules, but was there any difference? Putting everything else aside, just the fact that the heavenly Taos had instantly healed the cult leader of Sin Refinement's injuries was not breaking the rules. Then where did the resources to nurture the cult leader of Sin Refinement come from? From a mortal realm cultivator to a Nirvana great emperor. How many resources did he need? Who gave him the resources? Was that not breaking the rules? Enough. Don't fuss over such small matters. Isn't it good to extinguish the flames of war? Isn't it good to pacify the chaotic world? Isn't it good for everyone? Isn't it good for my tribe to be peaceful? The cult leader of Sin Refinement lifted his head to take a look. He could feel the heavenly might in the sky getting stronger and stronger. In the crack in the sky, the light of calamity was brewing. He knew that the time given to him by the ancestral god was up. He had to ascend back to the heaven domain, destroying the world, forging the heavenly wheel, becoming a god. How wonderful was that? It was truly an unforgettable and joyful journey for a man, no a god. From now on, all living things on this plane would forever sing the praises of the mighty Naga tribe. Emperor Lu threw his battle halberd down slowly, stabbing it straight into the ground. Under the divine Tao, emperors were ants. No matter how strong he was just an emperor without a god's tribulation and unable to forge the heavenly wheel. How could he defy the heavenly might and resist the will of a god? Looking at the flashing light of the god's tribulation in the crack in the sky, Emperor Li's face was filled with sorrow. He should have faced this tribulation as well, but it was controlled by the heavenly Tao. The Naga tribe didn't allow other gods to appear on this plane. Emperor Lu, actually, dying at the hands of a god is enough for you to smile in the underworld. The cult leader of Sin Refinement saw Emperor Lu throw his battle halberd away and knew that he had given up on resisting. Those below the divine Tao were ants, and resistance was futile. Then it was time. He would kill the last nirvana in the world and extinguish the flames of war. From now on, there would only be one Tao of slaughter on this plane, the Tao of the Naga gods. The huge blood scythe slashed out. The merciless scythe represented the will of the Naga gods. No one could resist it. Just as countless shouts and roars came from the walls of the holy city, the scythe cleaved towards Emperor Li's head. The cult leader of Sin Refinement had said that he would hang Emperor Li's skull around his neck. He swore that he would keep his promise. This was his beautiful vow to Emperor Lu. But why was Emperor Lu smiling at him? A smile that sent chills down one's spine. Shua! Just as the crimson scythe was about to strike, Emperor Lu shifted his feet slightly and a beam of sword light shot out from his back. It was the same crimson color, the same icy coldness, and the same unstoppable, overwhelming power. The cult leader of Sin Refinement's huge eyes widened as he watched his blood scythe being cleaved apart. What kind of sword was this? The heavenly might around him seemed non-existent. Only when his head was sliced off did the cult leader of Sin Refinement's head turn to reveal a head of long silver hair and a face. Good sword. This sword was really too fast. Plop! His head was separated from his body, and his soul was destroyed. His body and head were smashed into the dust of the battlefield. Regardless of whether he was a human or a god, Qin Hao did not even look at the cult leader of Sin Refinement from the moment he attacked. He shouted at the descending god tribulation, Emperor Lu, now is the time. This was a true god tribulation, an incomparably pure one. It was originally prepared for the descendants of the Naga gods. But the descendants of the Naga gods did not have the fortune to enjoy it. Chapter 2148. Boom! Kacha! Above the nine heavens, a majestic divine tribulation radiance came crashing down. It was like a twisting lightning python piercing through the void, trying to destroy this chaotic world. This Tao tribulation had been brewing for a long time. It could even be said that the moment the sect master of Sin Refinement fell into the mortal world, the plane controller had been preparing for his ascension. Today was the day of his ascension, transcending the tribulation, forging the heavenly wheel, quelling the chaos, extinguishing the flames of war, becoming a god, and unifying the continent. Everything was going according to the plan that Fork God had made hundreds of years ago. It was meticulous and smooth, but no one had expected Qin Hao, not even the plane controller. Who would have thought that the sect master of Sin Refinement would be slain by Qin Hao at the crucial moment? The tribulation that had been suppressed for hundreds of years, absorbing all the power of the heavenly Tao, had to be released. Even if Fork God wanted to reverse it, he couldn't. As the saying went, hundreds of years of painstaking effort only to become someone else's wedding dress. This was a vivid portrayal of this. Emperor Lu looked up at the divine tribulation, trembling with excitement. He naturally wouldn't hold back. He had been waiting for this Tao tribulation for too long. Therefore, he stepped into the sky, his bloated body facing the divine tribulation. The entire scene was shocking and tragic. At this moment, Emperor Lu seemed to want to shoulder everything for the sake of the people under his feet. It was simply noble. Chaos. The entire battlefield was in chaos. Shock appeared on everyone's face. From the start of the battle to the end, the sect master of sin refinement had died too quickly and too ridiculously. Other than those impassioned speeches, it was as though he had never been to the battlefield, as though he had never appeared in the mortal world. He was like a bubble that was extinguished with a light touch. Looking at their great leader's corpse that had been separated from his body, the members of the sin refinement cult that blotted out the sky and covered the earth were horrified. The warm embrace, the beautiful heaven, and the dream of creating a new life were all destroyed by the silver-haired young man's sword. Their faith collapsed, and they were leaderless. After the shock, there was endless panic. The sect master of sin refinement, whose eyes were filled with madness, woke up almost instantly. It was as though they had found their true selves. Instantly, their scalps went numb. Without any orders, they screamed and ran in all directions. Their sect master was dead, and there was no one to support them. Thinking of the evil deeds they had committed in the past, the bloody scenes were simply intolerable. Escape. Never stop running. Only by using the speed brought by his feet could the disciples of sin, who were like headless flies, feel that he was still alive, even though they did not know where to run to. However, the despairing scene occurred. In the distance, a colossus that connected to the sky stood up once again. The sky wall that had been destroyed into several sections turned into a barrier of death, sealing off the retreat of the black tide. One by one, the cranes lit up again, and the glaring light swept back and forth. The disciples who had just retreated from the holy city stepped into this place and were immediately twisted into scraps. Due to carelessness, or perhaps because they were too excited after breaking the sky wall, after successfully killing the holy city guard who was controlling the crane, no one in the entire Sin Refinement Church went to check whether the crane was really damaged or not, nor did they leave anyone to guard it. After all, in the eyes of all the Sin Refinement disciples, this battle was a sure win. In front of them was the Titan Avenue, so who would care if there was a way out behind them? Evil creature. A deep voice filled with anger reverberated in the sky. It was filled with extreme hatred. At the moment of the Sin Refinement Church's master's death, 3 figures descended on this continent together with the God's tribulation. The divine light was dazzling, and the momentum was overwhelming. Under the radiance of these 3 figures, everything turned black and white, and the aura they emitted was so terrifying that it was suffocating. Qin Hao looked up and saw 3 figures, one old, one young, and one old. Their eyes were like golden splendor, and they were expressionless. They were as noble as gods. Not Cha God tribe. Qin Hao knew that they were the representatives of the god of massacre, the ruler of the heavenly Tao in this place. Tianlun wriggled his body. The 3 figures were as bright as light. Their killing aura was so strong that they were no ordinary people. Even the strongest person on the continent, Emperor Lu, was like an ant before the radiance of these 3 figures. Qin Hao's eyes flashed with flaming patterns, and he swept his gaze across the 3 figures, one young and one young, and they only had one pattern and 10,000 years of cultivation. However, the old man had 2 patterns on his Tianlun. Clearly, the old man was the Na-Cha ancestor god that the Sin Refinement Church's master had mentioned. Luckily, the quality of these 3 fellows' Tianlun isn't that great. Qin Hao's only worry was soothed, and he could not help but feel more relaxed. One had 20,000 years of cultivation, while the other 2 had 10,000 years of cultivation. They were all lesser Tianlun, which was the worst mortal-grade Tianlun. This lineup was nothing in front of Qin Hao. Wang. Without any superfluous words, Qin Hao lifted his sword and went against the sky. He attacked decisively, and his body was like a blood-red rainbow that pierced through the sky. He directly attacked the old man in the middle of the three figures. That old man was undoubtedly the strongest, but he was also the ruler of the heavenly Tao. With lightning speed, he killed the old man. Qin Hao was only confident that he could complete the last step of his plan under the chaos of the heavenly Tao. As for Emperor Lu, at this point, Qin Hao could not help him. He had given Emperor Lu a divine tribulation. Whether he could survive the divine tribulation and the quality of his Tianluan would depend on Emperor Li's ability. Although Qin Hao could use the perfect Tianluan to temporarily use the power of the heavenly Tao, he could only use it. It was different from completely controlling it. He was not the ruler of the heavenly Tao and could not help Emperor Lu in his divine tribulation. Qin Hao's goal now was to kill. He had to get rid of the three trident gods in the shortest time possible so that he could protect himself. Otherwise, even if the immortal generals of the Tianjiao divine domain did not come, he would die in the rage of killing the immortal masters. He was probably the only one in the world who could steal the heavenly Tao. In the past, Qin Hao wouldn't have done this, but he really didn't have any way out. Beside the old man, the youngest god had a cold expression. He stepped on the void and created a layer of ripples. His whole body was covered in light particles as he charged towards Qin Hao. Along the way, a blood scythe similar to the one in the hands of the Sin Refinement Sect Master appeared in the young god's hands. It emitted a killing intent that could freeze the world. You dare to be so fierce in my massacre world. No matter who you are, you will die today. Pucci. As soon as the word die came out of the young man's mouth, a swift and violent light crossed his body. Qin Hao didn't have any reluctance, and his deep eyes were still fixed on the old man. At that moment, the pupils of the young god who had come to intercept him shrunk, and the blood scythe in his hand was cut in two. His throat squirmed as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he wasn't able to do so. His divine source was destroyed by the sword that had traversed through space, and he fell to the ground with a hole in his chest. God Punisher. On the walls of the holy city, Ruo Ling, Salo, and the rest of Emperor Li's subordinates witnessed this scene. They were so shocked that their hearts almost burst out of their chests. In the middle of the crowd, the middle-aged man who was the uncle of Mo Gu, who was secretly extending his hand towards Ruo Ling, withdrew his hand and dispersed the killing intent dilly. My son, a sword punishing a god. The young god fell to the ground. Beside the old man in the sky, the young man cried out in grief. Even though he had become a god, he could not bear the pain of losing his son. With the blood scythe in his hand, the heavenly wheel was released to the extreme. The killing intent caused the boundless space to shatter. The instant the young man made his move, the old man also made his move. Be careful. This person also has the heavenly wheel of the divine Tao. He has a powerful divine weapon in his hand. After all, he had lived for a long time. In the words of the illusionary venerable, his 20,000 years of cultivation were not for nothing. This old man had witnessed the death of Sin Refinement Sect Master and one of his divine grandsons. At this time, if he still could not see Qin Hao's true cultivation level, then he would be a planar ruler in vain. The error-free chapters of Primordial Alchemy Venerable will continue to be updated in the new Book C Pavilion. There will be no advertisements on the website. Please bookmark and recommend the new Book C Pavilion. If you like Primordial Alchemy Venerable, please bookmark. Primordial Alchemy Venerable's new Book C Pavilion is the fastest to update. Chapter 2149. Correct. Qin Hao revealed a warm smile. At the same time, a beam of purple gold light flew out from his body and crossed the space. In the blink of an eye, it was suspended in the sky and condensed into a cauldron with flowing runes. On the day of the attack on the Avicii Divine Domain, Jun Mo used this move. Today, Qin Hao learned the essence of it. Buzz. The mysterious runes of the Great Void Cauldron flowed. The Reincarnation Divine technique resonated strongly with Qin Hao. Circles of light waves swept out from the top of the sky. Although they didn't have strong offensive power, the light waves reversed the will of the heavenly Tao. Unknowingly, even the old man didn't notice that the heavenly Tao had already maintained a balance in the light waves of the cauldron. At this moment, Qin Hao's sword aura surged. The violent sword will radiated and gathered into 81 swords. The 81 swords contained a terrifying space. They formed a sword formation and surrounded the old man and the young man in the center. The great Tao of space was completely isolated at this moment. From afar, it looked like a green ancient pagoda that suppressed the old man, the young man, and Qin Hao. At the same time, the roar of the 9 heaven sword waterfall could be heard from the pagoda. This is impossible. The old man felt that the great Tao of space had been isolated by the sword formation. As the current master of the plane, how could he not be shocked when the heavenly wheels of the other divine worlds sealed the space of his plane in front of him? Although it was ridiculous, it really happened. Moreover, there was a terrifying cauldron above his head. Although he didn't know what it was used for, it made the old man feel more and more threatened. Kill. The young man's blood scythe slashed down, rolling up a red, killing light that was like a sea of blood. It raised a nauseating stench. His divine power was obviously much stronger than the young god who died. The elder felt a sense of crisis rising in his heart. How could he still sit still? He felt that he might die today. He suddenly stabbed the scepter in his hand, and the heavenly wheel in his body was released to the extreme. The blood in his body roared and churned, trying to resonate with the heavenly Tao and draw the will of the heavens to kill Qin Hao. However, the old man tragically discovered that even the power of his bloodline could no longer communicate with the heavenly ways. The space had been completely sealed off. It's not that I'm heartless, but I'm taking your lives to prove the sage path. Qin Hao's gaze was terrifyingly sharp. He didn't care about the young man and just stared at the old man. Ever since he came to the slaughter world, he had been cultivating for a period of time. Although he was forced to do this because he had no other choice, he was still cultivating. After all, the sages of the slaughter world had clearly written that using benevolence to fight against inhumanity was the path of the benevolent. Since the divine race broke the law to enforce the law, wouldn't that be considered inhumane? Therefore, Qin Hao was spreading the path of the sage path for the slaughter world. Qin Hao flew all the way to the old man. When he passed by the young man, flames rolled up in his palm and casually slashed at him. Whether it was the sword will that fused with the fire Tao or the fire Tao that fused with the sword Tao, even Qin Hao didn't know. He was just releasing his power instinctively. Boom! The flames from his palm collided with the sanguine divine ray. The scorching red lotus divine fire carried a terrifying sword will and collided with the ice-cold law of slaughter. In an instant, the scythe shattered and the young man died. Under the conditions of a single divine vein, the lowest grade mortal grade was no different from a mortal when facing a perfect heavenly wheel. After the death of the young god, the young man's divine source was incinerated by the surging flames and turned into black dregs that fell down. The difference from when Qin Hao killed the disciples of sin refinement was that the dregs formed after the death of this god seemed to be very heavy. They were like a pile of iron shavings that fell straight down. Even Qin Hao's fleeting steps couldn't disperse them. The old man was inconsolable as he looked at this scene. First, his descendants died before the divine tribulation, and then 2 of his descendants who had cultivated heavenly wheel were slaughtered. Today could be said to be a disaster for the Naga god race. The sword light flickered and the void hummed. The 81 sword wills that sealed the space made the old man understand that he wouldn't be able to survive. The disparity between him and Qin Hao was too big. His divine power was simply not on the same level as Qin Hao's. Even if I die, don't think you can have your way. The old man's eyes flashed with intense ruthlessness. The scepter in his hand unexpectedly made an unexpected move. It directly pierced his chest and pierced his body, shattering his divine source in one strike. When the divine source shattered and the heavenly wheel began to disintegrate, the old man let out a miserable laugh. The will of massacre that was on the verge of death was irrigated by the divine source's radiance and became incomparably berserk. It actually pervaded the air and began to frantically devour the sword formation. The old man was very clear that he couldn't break open this space. He also didn't think of breaking open the space to escape. He only hoped that the will of massacre that was exchanged by destroying the divine source would be able to slightly shake the sword formation. Just a little bit would do. When that time came, the will of the heavenly Tao would sense the death of the plane's ruler and fall into chaos. And the consequence of the chaos of the heavenly Tao would be to interrupt the power of faith of the plane, thus alerting the divine master in the divine domain. Hee, you are stronger than me. Dragging you down with me is not considered a loss. Just wait for the divine generals of massacre from the divine domain to come and kill you. The old man's body shattered bit by bit as he let out a carefree laugh. Qin Hao couldn't seize the divine tribulation, let alone seize control of the plane. What awaited him was the divine domain's punishment. He would be buried with the Naga god race. I'm sorry. Your courage is commendable. Unfortunately, your wish is just a fantasy. On Qin Hao's body, a dazzling wheel of light appeared. It spread all over his body and covered every part of his body. The perfect divine aura didn't have any blind spots. It formed its own universe. The old man's carefree laughter quickly turned into sorrow. At the moment when his divine sense dissipated, he finally understood what kind of opponent he had encountered. The perfect heavenly wheel actually had two extremely strong powers of faith in its aura. It was a plane ruler just like him. Moreover, there was an additional power of faith from another plane. Who exactly was this person? Was a divine prince descending? The old man's divine sense had already completely disintegrated. The answer as to whether or not this person was a divine prince had become a mystery. However, the old man had succeeded in one thing. With the damaged divine source as the foundation, the will of massacre formed by the will of massacre had indeed shaken the spatial sword formation that Qin Hao had set up. When the sword formation was shaken by the light of massacre, it produced a few ripples. The heavenly Tao in the outside world immediately became abnormal and instantly fell into a state of imbalance. Wang. At this moment, the great void cauldron came into play. Qin Hao desperately released the light of the heavenly wheel. He relied on the aura of the original realm to balance the heavenly Tao in this area. As it resonated strongly with the great void cauldron, the rings of light spread out and calmed the restless heavenly Tao. The balance was restored and the chaos was contained in the cradle. Beads of sweat started to form on his forehead. Qin Hao looked up at Emperor Lu, who was bathed in the light of calamity. He knew that he couldn't maintain this state for long. Although the perfect heavenly wheel could alleviate the will of the heavens and gradually merge with the heavenly Tao, this was all Qin Hao could do. After all, his cultivation was still too shallow. The power of the heavenly wheel wasn't enough. He couldn't completely control the heavenly Tao in this area. Next, it was up to Emperor Lu. Only when Emperor Lu successfully passed the calamity and forged the heavenly wheel of massacre could he perfectly merge with the heavenly Tao in this area. He could inherit the will of the heavenly Tao and become a true ruler. After all, Emperor Lu was a local god. Therefore, Qin Hao was still in danger. The rest was up to Emperor Lu. I can't hold on for long. Qin Hao pushed the light of the heavenly wheel to its limits. He had only been in the massacre world for a short period of time and had only cultivated for a short period of time. However, he had to shoulder the will of the entire plane. His little understanding of the Tao of massacre wasn't enough. He had to force himself. Chapter 2150. The great Tao roared, and light waves wreaked havoc. Heavenly light descended from the 9 heavens, blasting through the void. It was like a punishment that could destroy the world. Emperor Lu was trapped in the gods' tribulation. The violent great Tao of massacre corroded his flesh and entered his soul. He was undergoing the baptism of the gods' tribulation. He naturally felt the changes on the battlefield. The auras of the 3 Naga god tribe members had disappeared. According to the original plan, Qin Hao had successfully killed the gods. Now, the plane ruler had fallen, and the heavenly Tao was gradually falling into chaos. Qin Hao was doing his best to maintain the balance of the heavenly Tao. He urgently needed his help. Emperor Lu, who was going through the god's tribulation, knew all of this. He couldn't panic, and he couldn't be anxious. He had to successfully survive the god's tribulation and forge the heavenly wheel. Only then could he help Qin Hao. If he panicked and failed the god's tribulation, all his efforts would be wasted. His 1,000 years of hard work would be reduced to dust beyond redemption. I must become a god. Emperor Lu gritted his teeth and held on. This day was the day he changed his fate. Because of Qin Hao's appearance, he had the opportunity to shed his mortal body. If not for Qin Hao, there would be no god's tribulation. According to the plan, Qin Hao had completed most of the sky-stealing sun-swapping. He was only waiting for him to finish. How could he disappoint Qin Hao? Time passed slowly. In a race against time, Qin Hao, who was supporting the heavenly Tao, and Emperor Lu, who was trapped in the light of calamity, were both gritting their teeth and holding on. They were in equally perilous situations. From the moment Qin Hao stepped into Emperor Li's palace, the fates of the two living beings from different planes were tied together. They entrusted their lives to each other, and neither was allowed to fail. At this time, the situation on the battlefield below had also changed dramatically. The people of sinful refining sect had lost their fighting spirit and rationality because of the death of their sect master. Especially after witnessing Qin Hao killing a god, they were so scared that they almost went crazy. Although the number was very shocking, they didn't dare to fight in front of the weak Holy City guards. Now, Ruoling had taken over Emperor Li's job and was commanding the Holy City army, whose morale had been greatly boosted to counterattack. Salo was flying around wildly with his scimitar in hand. He was filled with killing intent as he tried his best to find Tomo Ji's shadow in the sea of people. In the messy crowd, the dignified, middle-aged man who was originally Ruo Ling's protector quietly left and moved closer to Qin Hao, who was struggling to carry the will of the heavenly way. No one noticed his abnormality. The dignified, middle-aged man discovered that although Qin Hao was very strong, so strong that he could kill gods as if they were dogs, he seemed to be unable to move all of a sudden. He lifted his eyes and glanced at Emperor Lu. Emperor Lu was trapped in the terrifying light of calamity. The dignified, middle-aged man had cultivated to the unblemished, immortal emperor realm. He naturally knew what this was. It was a divine tribulation that helped one shed their mortal body. Emperor Lu was about to transcend the tribulation and become a god. I can't touch either of them. Once I get rid of them, I'll be the most powerful person here. I'll be qualified to become a god and control this entire plane. Joy turned into madness in his eyes. The dignified, middle-aged man had encountered the greatest opportunity of his life. This day was also the day that would change his fate. Whoever put out the flames of war wouldn't be extinguished. The Fort God tribe could do it. Emperor Lu could do it, and so could the dignified, middle-aged man. In the past, he had been intimidated by Emperor Li's strength and didn't have a chance to shine. But now his chance had come. He could become the sky of this continent. A sharp blade appeared in his hand. The dignified, middle-aged man gripped the arch weapon of massacre tightly. The excitement and fear in his heart condensed into a morbid madness. He stabbed towards Qin Hao hysterically and unleashed all his cultivation. At this moment, he even let out a cry of pleasure that could only be heard during intercourse. Qin Hao, watch your back. Ruo Ling saw a beam of emperor light pass through the crowd and kill a large number of Sin refinement disciples and Holy City guards. She hurriedly shouted a warning as she flew over to help. However, the dignified middle-aged man was too vicious and too fast. He had taken advantage of Qin Hao's weakest moment to kill him. It seemed like no one in this world could stop him. Clang! Blinding sparks exploded in the back of Qin Hao's heart. An indescribably terrifying shock wave surged back. The dignified middle-aged man's palms went numb and the web between his thumb and index finger was torn. The arch weapon that he was so proud of was now reduced to dust in his hands. At this moment, the middle-aged man was still. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at Qin Hao. A terrifying shadow covered his heart. You're sick. Qin Hao silently turned back and said coldly. After that, he no longer looked at the dignified middle-aged man. He used all his strength to release the reincarnation divine, art, to maintain the balance with the great void cauldron. The difference between them was so great. The middle-aged man's face was filled with sorrow. His body turned into light and disappeared from the world. So this was a god. Qin Hao's body flickered with divine splendor. In the heavenly wheel, divine power flowed from his palms and turned into the Tao of massacre. It was difficult to merge with the heavenly wheel. To be honest, he was too focused and didn't notice the approaching danger. However, the dignified middle-aged man was too stupid. How would he dare to attack the heavenly wheel of the supreme path? Not to mention a mere unblemished emperor's Tao. Even the young god and youth who died in Qin Hao's hands would be killed by the laws when he released the perfect heavenly wheel. How dare the dignified middle-aged man? Where did his courage come from? Was there a misunderstanding in his evaluation of the supreme path? Qin Hao didn't have time to think. He felt that his divine power was greatly exhausted. The conversion rate of the red lotus divine power and space divine power into the Tao of massacre was too low. Now, the heavenly wheel was getting dimmer and dimmer. His trembling body seemed to be unable to hold on. Could it be that this was fate? He tried and tried. Before he could completely get rid of the pursuit of the Tianjiao divine domain, he boldly took an even more dangerous step and successfully killed the ruler of a plane in the divine world of massacre. However, fate played a joke on him. Everything he did seemed to be in vain. Looking at the cracks that appeared in the void, the will of the heavenly Tao began to shatter. The haze that grew everywhere turned into a black hole and began to cover the earth. The great void cauldron was like a firefly in the darkness, releasing a tiny radiance that couldn't illuminate the world. In the raging wind, the flying sand rose from the ground like monstrous waves and turned into countless tornadoes that swept wildly. The green mountains behind the sacred city withered and withered. Under the perception of divine thoughts, the endless mountains of the continent were shattered and the river veins were cut off and dried up. At this moment, Qin Hao clearly saw a faintly discernible ray of light break from the vault of heaven. He understood that it was the power of faith transmitted by the plane's will to the divine master of massacre. This light of faith was now broken. Dong! The dim great void cauldron fell from the ninth heaven and landed on Qin Hao's face. Along with him, it smashed down. The powerless Qin Hao felt as if he had fallen into the abyss. In the end, he was still defeated. No matter how perfect his plan was, he still lost to himself. If he was a little stronger, if he had a few more lines of Tao, he could hold on for a longer time and even rely on his vast Tao to suppress the heavenly Tao. Unfortunately, he was too weak. Don't give up. A voice sounded in his ear. It sounded so warm. Qin Hao saw a white remnant soul appear. Muri actually held up her hands and took over the great void cauldron. She wanted to use her remnant soul body and the lowly Dilly to help her hold up this side of the sky and continue the broken light of faith. Senior sister. Qin Hao's eyes became blurry in an instant. With a quiver, he flipped over and stood up. His 5 fingers clenched like claws as he and Miao Li held up the divine cauldron on the left and right, flying towards the collapsing heavenly Tao. Unfortunately, the light of faith that drove out of the void gradually disappeared into the eldritch wilderness. With Qin Hao's current Tao of massacre that could not even be considered scratch, it was impossible for him to continue it. Sorry to keep you waiting. A figure appeared in front of him. Dazzling wheel light was released, and the majestic massacre was like extreme ice. With a thought, it engulfed the entire continent, completely freezing and stabilizing the crumbling mountains and rivers. Immediately after, Emperor Li's chubby hand grabbed towards the sky. His divine Tao wheel light was pushed to the extreme. The torrential massacre aura condensed into a beam of light of faith that pierced through the void. It chased after the light at a speed several times faster than normal. It connected with the light and merged perfectly. Not even a trace could be found. It was as though the light had never been broken. Wong, a strong massacre will turned into spiritual will and swept out from Emperor Li's body. It quickly swept across the continent. The raging astral winds, crumbling mountains and rivers, and dried-up rivers all calmed down and were repaired. The green mountains regained their vitality. The shattered heavenly Tao also gradually healed and started operating again. At this moment, the Holy City army on the battlefield, and even the fleeing Sin refinement disciples, all living things felt the descent of Emperor Li's will. It was like the will of heavenly Tao. Plop! Qin Hao, who was almost exhausted, fell from the sky to the ground. He looked at Emperor Lu, who was floating above his head. He breathed out the air in his chest and smiled as though a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Although Emperor Li's heavenly wheel was badly damaged, and many parts of his body were not covered by god power, it was only a saint-grade heavenly wheel. However, he had successfully passed the heavenly tribulation and ascended to immortality. God looked. The battlefield calmed down. Countless people knelt down and worshipped Emperor Lu, who was hanging high in the sky. Ruo Ling's eyes were filled with tears. She was so emotional that she did not know what to say. Had her father become a benevolent killing god? In that case, wouldn't she have turned from a little princess to the daughter of a god? Emperor Li's golden eyes looked downwards. The Tian Luan on his body was incomparably sacred. He lifted his hand and pointed toward a certain direction. Instantly, terrifying slaughter particles were like a cluster of stars that had been destroyed. They expanded wildly. Regardless of whether it was the fleeing Sin Refinement sect members or the Sin Refinement sect members who had given up their evil and submitted to him, all of them disappeared one by one. They were wiped out by the will of the heavenly Tao. God Lu, please forgive us. A huge blood python rolled on the ground. It was the blood python emperor. The moment the city gates opened, the blood python emperor was the first to betray the Sin Refinement sect's master. Emperor Li's golden eyes looked down. He did not care about the blood python emperor's pleas for mercy. He watched as the blood-colored python turned into light and disappeared. Not only that, all the humans and demons who had betrayed the holy city, including his former subordinates, were not spared. They were all wiped out. He had said that he would give the people in the city a chance to choose. However, once they left the holy city, there was no turning back. No, let me go. Watching the bodies disappear before his eyes, Tomo Gu, who had escaped into the defense line of the crane tower, knelt on the ground. A domineering, bloated figure of a god appeared in his mind. In the next moment, Tomo Ji's body suddenly split into pieces. He exploded from an unstoppable force. It was like an ambition that he could not control. He actually ran so far away. I was wondering why I couldn't find him. Sorrow returned his scimitar to its scabbard and smiled at the sky. Soon after, he knelt down to worship the figure of the god. The 300 years of chaos have come to an end. The ruler of this plane, Lu, reports to the god master and extinguishes the flames of war. Emperor Lu chanted and looked up at the void. He sent the mirror image of the continent into the light of faith and sent it to the endless massacre God's dominion. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Almost immediately, the seeds of darkness that had fallen into the lower world and covered almost all the cities and mountains of the continent miraculously disappeared. They were extinguished by the will of the massacre god. Woo woo. The chaos is over. We have passed the 500-year calamity of Fire Beacon. God look, God look, God look. Below, countless holy city guards cried to the sky. Tears flowed uncontrollably. They knelt on one leg and waved their arms as they shouted. For this day, countless people had died. Now, they were the only survivors of the continent. That's pretty impressive. Qin Hao lay on the ground. His palm sent Muri's remnant soul back into the heavenly wheel. He was both physically and mentally exhausted. All he wanted now was to sleep. A mighty exalted god, lying on the ground, is a disgrace to him. Loud laughter rang out in the air, following which it floated down slowly. Under the shocked expressions of countless people, it bowed to Qin Hao, who was sprawled on the ground. "Thank you for your hard work, exalted God." Chapter 2151. Back at Imperial Lu Palace, the two had spoken for the first time. Emperor Lu had chosen to trust Qin Hao without knowing the situation. At that time, he did not even know if Qin Hao had truly reached the godly level, or if he could kill the plain ruler. This trust was priceless in the world. If Qin Hao could not slay the god, Emperor Lu would be buried with him. Under the calamity of Fire Beacon, Emperor Lu had no way out. When the plan began, his life was already in Qin Hao's hands. And Qin Hao also trusted Emperor Lu. The Nirvana tribulation was a great disaster. Once he failed, even if Qin Hao succeeded in killing the plain ruler, it would be useless. What awaited him would be the wrath of the murderous divine master. He would be consigned to eternal damnation. Qin Hao had no way out, and neither did Emperor Lu. They had no way out, but they had forged a path forward together, creating a brand new world for themselves. The holy city was still as glorious as ever. But Emperor Lu of the mortal world was no longer in the city. Emperor Lu left behind an empty imperial palace, as well as the god statue in front of the palace gates. Emperor Lu floated away, vanishing without a trace. No one knew where Emperor Lu had gone. Ruo Ling, Salo, and a group of loyal and devoted subordinates had also disappeared, including the silver-haired youth who had slaughtered 3 gods and a few lesser demons that no one cared about. But everyone knew that Emperor Lu controlled the heavenly Tao and had ascended to godhood. He had left the mortal world. The 500-year calamity of Fire Beacon ended in 300 years. Although the world was peaceful, the next cycle of reincarnation welcomed all life. After 500 years, the Fire Beacon would come again. At this moment, far away from the plain, a dazzling shrine floated in the endless sky. It moved slowly, like the eye of a god, silently watching the mortal world from behind. This shrine was originally the residence of the Forked God tribe. With the fall of the Forked Ancestor God and the elimination of his divine servants and a few descendants, the Forked God tribe became the new masters of the shrine. What did you do to the descendants of the Forked tribe? In a luxurious pavilion built from jade, Qin Hao took a light sip of tea. He put down the cup and looked curiously at Emperor Lu, who had become a god. In this dimension, Emperor Lu was the absolute ruler of life and death. Their memories were erased, and they were exiled to the mortal world. The Wu god smiled calmly and did not kill them. Qin Hao nodded. As expected of a cultivator of the path of killing, Wu Shun was open-minded enough. "Exalted God, what do you need me to do next?" the Wu god asked. He was very respectful towards Qin Hao. On one hand, Qin Hao's divine power was extremely powerful. On the other hand, without Qin Hao, how could he be where he was today? The heavenly wheel of the spirit Tao, this temple, and this position that overlooked all life were all given to him by Qin Hao. Emperor Lu was very grateful. "I will first go to the lower realms to find a place to cultivate in seclusion." Qin Hao had suffered too much in the Tao of divine patterns. Now that he was out of trouble, his first priority was to improve his strength. He did not want to fall to the heavenly Tao of other dimensions again. He did not want to meet Jun and Mo again and be beaten to a pulp by the Sky Splitter. He did not want to see his friends and family die one by one. He could only lie on the ground helplessly and guiltily. He did not want to experience that kind of regret again. The Wu god nodded. "I will erase all traces of you in this dimension, as well as the memories of all life on the battlefield of the holy city." He did not understand why Qin Hao had left this supreme temple and chosen to go to the lower realms. Perhaps he lacked a sense of security. However, the Wu god would erase all memories of Qin Hao, including the remnants of Tao that even Qin Hao himself could not detect. "Thank you," Qin Hao said. "There is no need to thank me, exalted God. I have relied on you to achieve what I have today, but..." The Wu god seemed to be worried, and his brows furrowed slightly. "But what?" Qin Hao asked. "There is not much time left for you, exalted God. According to the divine order sent by the believers, after all the flames of war have subsided, exalted God will ask the rulers of the dimensions to bring people to the divine realm for an audience. The Wu God said. Bring who? Qin Hao became vigilant. The people who forged the heavenly wheel during the tribulation of fire and war. The Wu God's eyes flashed with seriousness and anger. The exalted God's tribulation of fire and war was meant to cleanse all life. Although the method was cruel, it played an important role in the cultivation of the world of slaughter. Because if one did not cultivate and become stronger, they would die. Under such circumstances, everyone was forced to do what they wanted, and the atmosphere of martial arts was pushed to the peak. Qin Hao nodded silently. The situation was clear as he looked at the dimension under their feet. The weak were all dead, and those who survived were at the exalted realm. Exalted realm, in the divine wilderness continent of the past. This was enough to make one the rulers of the 9,000 lesser realms. Here, they were no different from ants and could not be more normal. I have seen countless cycles of fire and war in the heavenly Tao. I do not understand why the exalted God would do this or why he is so cold-blooded, but there must be a reason behind it. Perhaps we will know the answer when we go to the divine realm, the Wu God said. He looked at the continent below the shrine and saw that it was covered in desolation and had many things to do. The pitiful creatures of this plain had died, and only a few tens of millions remained. He will be very busy from now on. His figure was tall and straight, and there was no sound when he stepped on the ground. The moment this figure walked out, the chaotic buzzing in the Azura field immediately fell into absolute silence. Scram! A cold and arrogant voice came from below. The leader of the Tianzhou divine generals lowered his head slightly and saw a young man dressed in black with a red robe draped over his shoulders. His features were fair, his eyes were noble, and his temperament was cold. His black hair nearly touched the ground, and his body exuded a boundless killing intent that caused the Tianzhou divine general's heart to tremble. Leave immediately and scram back to your Tianzhou divine realm. The slaughter realm does not welcome the gods of the primeval realm, the youth coldly said. Whoa, oh whoa. At this moment, in the empty Azura field in front of the divine palace, an overwhelming number of figures appeared. They seemed to be cheering as they shouted strangely at the Tianzhou divine realm soldiers. What did you say? A divine soldier stepped out from behind the divine general. He clenched his teeth and stared at the noble youth who had appeared at the entrance of the divine palace. How dare he treat the Tianzhou divine general like this? Even someone from a God King faction could not treat them like this. Whoosh! A beam of light shot out from the noble youth's eyes without any warning. Almost at the instant he raised his head, the light from his eyes, which contained the Tao of slaughter, pierced through the divine source of the divine soldier who had stepped out. The light of the wheel shattered, and the heavenly wheel disintegrated. An elite divine soldier who had evolved 5 runes died under the noble youth's indifferent gaze. Scram, the noble youth said. You... The Tianzhou divine general was enraged. A blinding divine light surrounded his body as a vast halo began to revolve. The surging nomological particles illuminated the entire black peak. Under the divine general's suppression, the Azura field below began to tremble. 7 meridian divine runes. The noble youth stared at the Tianzhou divine general's heavenly wheel. 7 meridians of the immortal grade. He should be considered a relatively strong god. The young man lifted his palms slightly. Around the black peak, endless murderous intent swept over and turned into numerous spears of slaughter, revolving around his body. At this moment, an extreme, killing intent spread out and seemed to freeze the entire world. "Everyone, be careful!" "The Tianzhao Divine," General shouted. "The Tianzhao Divine," General shouted. Then he struck out with his palm. The celestial wheel roared, and the 7 dazzling divine inscriptions released a powerful light. It turned into a monstrous divine force and gathered in his palm. He struck down with his palm. Boom! The void seemed to sink under this palm. "This is my daughter. Please have mercy on her. I beg you." Wu Shen looked at Ruo Ling, who was held in the young man's hand. Her expression was one of extreme pain. Her father began to cry. He was afraid that his daughter would end up like those cultivators. However, in front of the Slayer, even if he was a god, even if he was the master of this plane, he was still as insignificant as an ant in the mortal world. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.